Oh, yes. Paleblood. Well, you've come to the right place. Yharnam is the home of blood ministration. You need only unravel its mystery. But where's an outsider like yourself to begin? Easy, with a bit of Yharnam blood of your own. But first, you'll need a contract. Good. All signed and sealed. Now, let's begin the transfusion. Oh, don't you worry. Whatever happens, you may think it all a mere bad dream.
You found yourself a hunter.
Hello everyone, this is Aegon of Astora, and welcome back to Bloodborne Let's Talk Lore. This is episode number 28, being recorded on Friday the 20th of May. I hope you're all having a fantastic day today, whenever it is you find yourself watching this. So you may recall back in episode 1 in July of 2015 that we actually started this series not with that intro, but with a recreation of Gehrman's becoming captive in the Hunter's Dream. So we, in effect, started with the end, and now we're ending with the beginning, because this is the finale. And so here with me to help us unravel Yharnam's secrets is Redgrave. Hi, Redgrave.
This isn't Dark Souls 3.
It's not Dark Souls 3,
People
no.
still play this game? Oh, wow. Hello.
And JSF. Hi,
Hello,
JSF.
everybody. Hi.
So, yeah, it's going to be really a battle royal at various points throughout this episode, I imagine. But,
it is.
But we do have a couple of structured discussion points planned. And so the first of which, before we get to the fisticuffs between JSF and Redgrave, is a question for Redgrave.
Yeah.
And that is, what the heck did we just see in that introduction?
Yeah, so that introduction with the beast coming out of the blood is probably one of the weirdest things in the game, because I think we can safely say that it's an illusion. That it's that's not actually happening, or that it's something symbolic, because you never see that effect ever again. Like, you never ever see a beast coming out of blood like that ever. So what I always saw it is like, that's the beast coming to claim you and like make you a part of the scourge, except it touches you and then it gets set on fire. When I first played the game, I thought that it was a messenger like throwing a fireball at it or something. I thought I had gotten like an assist from the messengers, but yeah, no.
But they show up afterwards,
They do,
right?
yeah, they do show up afterwards. But when they showed up, I was like, oh, you guys must have thrown a fireball at that monster for me. Awesome. But like, looking back at it now, like, it's clearly something very much more symbolic than that, where it touches you and you reject it.
that the because, you know, we were receiving some Yharnam blood of our own, as the Blood Minister put it.
Right.
And that the, I guess, beast aspect of that blood, or you know, if we're to continue with the four humors, the humoral theory of blood ministration and Bloodborne that JSF and I discussed in the last 2 times he was on, that, like, I guess the beast humor of the old blood was rejected by the Paleblood Hunter.
Well, I'm not too sure about the four humor stuff. I'd have to go back and rewatch that video, but yeah, no, it's like whatever beast is like if that beast touched you and started killing you, you would turn into like a scourge beast or like a huntsman or something like that. But it doesn't.
And you wouldn't be a Paleblood Hunter, right?
Right, you'd become blood drunk, and then there's the doll saying you find yourself.
So the messengers in that in this arrangement, then, would the messengers be agents of whichever great one is responsible for branding you with the Hunter's Mark?
I'd say they're responsible for the one that talks to you right there, but that's kind of a controversial statement.
JSF, do you have any thoughts on who or what it is that brands the Hunter's Mark on us?
Well, I always thought it was the messengers because of the way the doll says, you found yourself a hunter. She's talking to them, and they found a hunter. So either we had the Hunter's Mark to begin with and they noticed it in us, or...
And she says to us...
They've stuck it on us.
She says to us when we first go to the Hunter's Dream that the messengers are the inhabitants of the dream.
And that they find hunters. And then they worship them.
Yeah.
And that by virtue of the Hunter's Mark, we are bound to the dream.
Yeah.
The question is did we have the Hunter's Mark before we came to Yharnam or after?
Yeah. Well, we're probably going to get into that when we talk about the note.
Yeah.
Well, so we're head there now. And this is actually, I think, the 4th time we've been in Iosefka's clinic in this playthrough, which is surprising to me. And something that JSF, you pointed out in your Bloodborne up close video on Iosefka's clinic is that the entrance we just took, that's not the actual entrance, right?
No, that's a window that's been forcibly knocked out. You can see around it there's bits of window frame and brick and glass.
And that's the table that we were lying on, the one on the right, right?
Yeah.
It would have the Canehurst invitation on it if you...
Yeah.
Yeah, if I had not already
If you
picked
had
it
not
up.
already picked that up.
Which is interesting because I believe that's the only instance in the game where there are items not on an actual corpse model. I could be wrong about that, though. The bloody invitation as well. But here it is.
Skull in the Nightmare is not on a corpse model.
Oh, touche.
Yeah.
Touche. So here it is. So,
The note.
JSF, what is the deal with this note?
Well, we were talking about this before we were recording. And
We were arguing about this before.
it says... The Japanese text says either... It says note to oneself, which could mean that we left it. But the
question is who is the one in oneself there, right?
Well, even discarding kind of the note, the fact is that the game starts with the minister saying, yes, Paleblood, well, you've come to the right place. Meaning, we appear to have asked him, hey, we're here to look for Paleblood. Mm-hmm. Can you help us find some? And then when you get deeper into the game, no one knows about Paleblood outside of, the School of Mensis and possibly, the real, inner echelons of the church.
I mean, we never get to talk
anything.
to, a church
Yeah.
member. So we don't really know if the Healing Church does
really,
or does not
really,
know about it.
But no one brings it up as the thing out. There's 3 other references to Paleblood in the whole game, and they're all very late in it, and they're all around, Mensis.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
with the Blood Minister, it seems like he's just telling you what you want to hear. Oh, yes, Paleblood.
But what it seems like happened is we just said, hi, we're in Yharnam, we're looking for Paleblood. He's like, oh, Paleblood, well, you come to the right place. I'll minister you, then you can go to the Healing Church and get this Paleblood, whatever it is.
He says, you've come to the right place. Yharnam is the home of Blood Ministration.
It's the home of Blood Ministration. Yeah, so, and then, Gilbert, he says, oh, Paleblood, I've never heard of it. Mm-hmm. Then he says, but if you're looking for Paleblood, go to the Healing Church. Yeah, go to the Grand Cathedral. If you're looking for this Paleblood stuff, I don't know what it is. So it just, the fact that we know about Paleblood is really, really weird. Mm-hmm. And, the fact that we were talking about the Hunter's Mark, did we have it before, or did we not have it? And if the Hunter's Mark binds us to the dream, then it's like, did we find something in the dream?
The thing is, like, in Souls games, who your character was before the adventure started was never important until Bloodborne. And, like...
Yeah.
Other than for role-playing
Other
reasons,
than for role-playing, right, you can come up with any backstory you want, and you can still do that in Bloodborne. But...
Sorry, Redgrave, just briefly, that this right here, as JSF pointed out in his video on Iosefka's clinic, which you'll find a link to in the description below, seems to be the Blood Minister's wheelchair, right?
Well, it's not the same model.
Because in the introduction, he has like a little lantern on the.
He's the same model that the guys with the guys in wheelchairs with guns have, and they've got a little lantern. The wheelchair is a lot more like extravagant. Mm-hmm. So it's not the same model wheelchair.
But it's also like this place is not wheelchair accessible.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a wheelchair, and then when we go into the room over there, which has Rip. I don't even remember his name anymore. I've been playing too much Dark Souls 3. The Abhorrent Beast. Rip the Abhorrent Beast. But I don't know. The simplest explanation in this case, to me, seems that this is the Blood Minister, and that Impostor Iosefka, as you argued in that video, JSF, that Impostor Iosefka maybe was trying to, perfect her method of...
Well, she's still trying to perfect it when we find her.
Yeah. And saying that, this time I'll be using Old Blood if you confront her and then leave. And I was just motioning there to the chest, just to point out that in the chest the communion room, which I think is really significant because it suggests that the reason people are being turned into Celestials is so that you can commune with the Great Ones. Yeah,
and you get the, is it the highest communion for beating the Emissary?
You get the
second highest one.
You get the plus 4
second
for beating the Emissary. The plus 2, I believe, is in the Nightmare Lecture Room.
I think the best ones are almost always in the Chalice Dungeons, right?
Yeah.
Or in the
There's another one at the top of the
Healing Church
near the workshop. Yeah.
And so now we something that we're going to be talking a great deal about in this episode is the Cord of the Eye, or I guess the Cords of the Eye. I don't really like calling it third umbilical cord.
I have since I've completely moved away from that because I've seen way too many different sources.
So much confusion, right?
Yeah. And the Spanish localization has something completely different for it, so I'm just like,
no, but the PAL localization that's in English has a different one.
Yeah, I'm just like, fuck it. I just Cord of the Eye, whatever.
I don't understand why they didn't just go with that. Yeah, because it seems like the most apt name for it.
Oh wow, she's still alive.
Yeah. No, we've not been back here since. Nope. But this series has been going on almost a year now, so I guess you're right to be surprised that we've not yet killed her. But we find her in a pretty interesting state. You can see that she's switching. She appears to be having some kind of neurological episode.
She's not pregnant, I'll say that much.
She's not pregnant.
Pregnant.
Look at her waistline. It's
Although, to be fair, Arianna, when she's pregnant, she doesn't.
But she is at least leaning over.
And you'd think that Iosefka would be splayed or something if she was pregnant. This is something completely different.
I get why people think she's pregnant.
Yeah.
God, I'm nauseous. Have you felt this? It's progressing. I can see things. I knew it. I'm different. I'm no beast. Oh, God, it feels awful. But it proves that I'm chosen. Don't you see how they writhe inside my head? It's rather rapturous.
So, 1/3 umbilical cord, or again, Cord of the Eye. A great relic also known as the Cord of the Eye. Every infant Great One has this precursor to the umbilical cord. Provost Willem sought the cord in order to elevate his being and thoughts to those of a Great One by aligning his brain with eyes. the only choice he knew if man were to ever match their greatness. And we also earlier picked up another umbilical cord. This one reads, every great one loses its child, and then yearns for a surrogate. The third umbilical cord precipitated the encounter with the pale moon, which beckoned the hunters and conceived the hunter's dream. So, of course, that's the one that we picked up in the abandoned church workshop.
The abandoned old workshop.
Or the abandoned old workshop, pardon me. But yeah, this is one aspect of the game, in spite of, like, I don't think that 1/3 of umbilical cord is a good name for it, but I still don't really get the umbilical cords.
In the version I've got, it's called third umbilical cord, not 1/3 of.
Oh, you have the PAL version.
Yeah, because I've got the PAL version.
Oh, that's so weird. It just says third umbilical cord. That's so fucking
It's
weird.
Called a third cord.
That
that's
has
why
to
I
be
keep calling it third cord.
Third cord has to be wrong. 1/3 may be right because you need 3 of them. Third cord has to be wrong.
Yeah, but there's a note in the lecture hall that says 3 third chords. Yeah. Is that the same in the NTSC one?
Yeah, it is the same.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
But so I guess maybe that is a consideration in terms of we want players to be able to figure out how to get
3.
Yeah, the third ending. So if you make it really explicit, not only by naming them third chord, even though there's 4 of them in the game, but if you name it, third umbilical cord, and then in addition to that you have that note that says 3 third chords, then I didn't figure it out. I actually backed into it by accident. I actually thought I made a mistake my first playthrough. I used them, and I don't remember what the heck it was I was trying to do with them, but I thought I made a mistake.
When a friend of mine was playing through Bloodborne the first time, he was like terrified to use them because he was like, do I need to have them for a special thing? Because if you remember, like in Dark Souls 2, there were people who used the giant souls, and then they were fucked. They could not fight Vendrick
trying to fight Vendrick,
So he sent me a message. He was like, what do I, like, can you just tell? And I was just use them. Because it is one of those things where you'd think, like, maybe I should hold on to this, and then you get sort of screwed out of the third ending.
Because it just says...
I used them because I thought you would need... I thought there was going to be another ending that unlocked at 99 insight, and I lost a bunch of insight going through Upper Cathedral Ward because of the brain suckers. So I just, like, bit the bullet and used them all.
Yeah, see that's the thing, because it only actually gives you 3 insight, technically, in terms of the game mechanics. But obviously, when you use 3 of them, it's not the insight itself that actually matters in terms of the stat insight. It's that, your character, for some reason, is able to resist the moon presence. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And something else I was thinking about here was, and I suppose I answered my own questions when I saw the caskets here, that this seems to just be one of those, like, as Redgrave argued in, I think it was your second Little Things in Yharnam video? The very first one, on the caskets.
Yep.
And how, like, with the carts and everything there, that they seem with the caskets all around them, and that we find in Yahargul that there's a casket that actually, the cramped casket that actually explodes out of one of those things.
If it wasn't for that cramped casket that, like, literally jumps out at you, then I would say it was kind of a stretch of a theory. But given that, like, we know those caskets are inside the stagecoaches, I'd say that's pretty much all the evidence you need.
Well, and at the time, it was like, I remember first watching that video and having my mind just blown because it, but now you think about it, it almost just seems like,
that's
take it for
Bloodborne in a nutshell, man. If you go back to the first week after Bloodborne came out, it's ridiculous how much we're like, oh my god, this plot is so easy and simple to comprehend. It's like,
here we are still talking about it,
but it's like,
a year later.
Oh my god, if you remember, if anybody watching remembers, like, the first couple of weeks after Bloodborne came out, like, the number of insane theories and questions going around was, like,
I was
staggering.
Completely lost.
Everyone was lost.
If you see, because I stumbled into the third ending accidentally. And basically at the end, I was just, my reaction was essentially just,
wait, what?
What? I don't know, what the fuck happened here? I don't get it at all. And it took me quite some time, and to a degree, I still don't get it, but I'm totally okay with that.
Like Redgrave and I were talking about this the other day, but it's like, in comparison to Demon Souls, like, Demon Souls also has an ending that's has like a cosmic horror sort of aspect to it.
Yeah, that sort of comes out of
It's
nowhere.
not really clear what's happening, but at the same time, that ending is, even if you don't entirely comprehend it, it's clear something really bad is happening. Whereas in this one, unless you've really closely followed the whole, like, Willem is trying to ascend human beings thing, if you get childhood's beginning, it's just like, what?
What?
Well, and especially,
Yeah.
I had no idea about Lovecraft at all at that point.
That is a problem that a lot of people ran into when you get things like
Yeah.
Dream and
Yeah.
what's the other one? I was just thinking. There's like Dream and Cosmos, and when you start seeing these words pop up, if you don't have a background in what they mean, you don't need to like have read Lovecraft, but you need to understand the ideas behind it. It is very easy to get very lost.
Because like that
and-
was that
Sorry,
was
go
kind
ahead,
of where I
JSF.
found myself, because I had not read a great deal of Lovecraft, but I'd read enough to sort of get what was going on. Like I remember going to the Nightmare Frontier and realizing, oh, those things there are gugs. They're from Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. That's what dream means in this context. Okay.
Right.
It can't be. This is a nightmare.
So, JSF,
Yes.
Odin did this?
Well, we think so.
For once, yes.
For once, it actually...
It's the most likely thing that Erden has done,
Yeah.
of all the things attributed to Erden.
Well, and again, so I would highly recommend to everyone, if you haven't seen JSF's video on Odin, I think it's the best video that anyone, and Redgrave's video on Odin is excellent as well.
Mine's better.
But
Also, I just want to say real quick, this is, and I said it while we were being quiet, but this is easily the most disturbing scene in the entire game by a long shot. This, when I first stumbled on this, it actually made me sick. Like the idea.
I actually walked away from it. I didn't hit either of them. I used the other three chords.
This
that,
actually made me nauseous. Just this
and it's actually
scene right here.
A great deal smaller than the other
it's
celestial children. Like, it's an actual newborn celestial, baby celestial,
And
whatever they're called.
there are ones that are much bigger than average in the Is Chalice. So,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that aren't covered in blood like this one. Like, it's
this is the
clear
only
that
one
she
that's
just
covered in
gave
blood
birth
like this.
to it.
Yeah, like it's
She just gave birth to it. And yeah, so what I was under the impression that they were connected, so that if you hit this one, then she was supposed to die.
How did you do
as well.
that? I've tried a million. That's a bug. That's a bug.
That has to be
okay.
a bug.
It is a bug,
Yeah,
and
I
I'll tell
thought
you
so
why
too.
it's a bug. Because there are actually two different. I can't believe I've tried 1,000 times to
Oh, you're
get
still
to do
getting
that.
such corpse?
I couldn't know that. So that
this
that
is
was
okay,
that was
so
for the that was
I
for
can
the
tell you why
celestial.
this is a bug. This is a bug because there are actually two animations for what will happen to her. If you hit her, she will slump forward and she'll go like and she'll die. But if you kill the Nightmare Child without killing her, she has a different sort of death animation where she slumps to one side. So
And somehow
this is 100% a bug, and it's one
Okay, 'cause I
I've
was
tried to
really
reproduce
confused
a
by that.
billion times.
and I did it by accident.
Yeah.
So Arianna's shoes worn by Arianna, woman of the night in the cathedral ward, innocent and cute in contrast with its owner.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Just a review that she's also wearing the noble dress, which is said to be worn by the nobles of the old bloodline that traces back to the Forsaken Castle of Cainhurst. And then we also have the Cord of the Eye, which we get off of her baby, which got caught on my foot there for a second.
Yeah, ragdolls.
And yep, and it started twitching and freaked me out a little bit. So even more so than the bug already did. And so the description for this one reads, every Great One loses its child and then yearns for a surrogate, and Odin, the formless Great One, is no different. To think it was corrupted blood that began this eldritch liaison. So the corrupted blood there, given the context and everything together, would seem to be that of Cainhurst, right? The Cainhurst bloodline?
The Cainhurst bloodline, which may or may not be very closely tied to the Thumerian bloodline.
Tumerian.
Whatever.
Get it straight.
Fuck off.
Everyone's always complaining to me about pronunciations. So.
Fuck off. They're Thumerians.
Also, it's pronunciation.
Oh, shut up. Shut up.
I'm gonna call them Thumerians until I fucking die.
Well, I'll call them Thumerians, and then I'll be like, oh crap, I meant to say Tumerian.
Fuck that. I'm my own man.
But yeah, so like again, all the evidence points to Odin here, and like the fact that he's explicitly mentioned in the item description for the
I think the
Cord
fact
of the
that he's mentioned is more than enough. Like that, okay.
And it's Odin Chapel.
Yeah. And his influence, as JSF you argued in that video, is localized around Odin Chapel.
Yeah.
And also, something we didn't talk about with Impostor Iosefka is kind of her movement throughout the game world. And something that you argued in that same video was that it's possible that when we open the door, because the trigger for her Impostor Iosefka replacing real Iosefka is entering Odin Chapel. So
it's opening the doors. It's not going to this room, it's opening the door to the main chapel. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it would seem that she took the cord that she had from Bergenworth, and then came to Odin Chapel, and then found her way to Iosefka's clinic. Well, am I remembering that correctly?
When I'm doing air quotes here, argue things like that, it was more like, if you have to say someone in the game wrote that note, she's the most likely candidate.
JSF,
but it could just be anyone.
JSF and I had like a long conversation about this, and the consensus we came to was like, if that study has to belong to someone in the game,
and if that note had to be written
by someone in the game, Iosefka's the best candidate. But it doesn't have to be at all.
It doesn't have to be.
Because like, you'll notice it's really close in terms of proximity to Upper Cathedral Ward, where the choir are.
Yes.
So it could be anyone from the choir.
And also, I don't know if this means anything either, but like, when we find her head is shuddering uncontrollably.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I considered saying hello to all of these merry folk here, but I figured we'd haven't had enough depressing stuff for now, so... So something I obsessed with over the course of the last several months, but especially over the course of doing this recording, is trying to make sense of the gosh darn skybox in the Hunter's Dream.
You mean the pillars?
No. The pillars seem to make sense after the DLC.
Do you mean the fact that the moon is right there and it's not behind the clouds in orbit?
That as well, but the fact that
the moon is fucking
move.
there.
But the moon seems to move.
I'll tell you why.
Why?
It's because the moon is the moon presence.
Yes, but that doesn't explain... I don't know.
Boom!
Well, I was just looking at it from sort of a preliminary perspective here, but later on, before we do one of the three endings, I can't remember which one it is, I basically run from one spot, and then I look at the moon, and then I run to another spot, I look at the moon again, and I like, in my head, I just can't make sense of where it is.
Does it actually move in the skybox?
It appears as though it does. But
doesn't
there's
it move
also
behind where the moon presence is, so it can descend in front of it?
It moves to a different...
No, what
so
I mean
is almost...
Is it the case that if you just sit in the Hunter's Dream for like 30 hours doing nothing, the moon will slowly move? It's not the case, right? No.
It stays in the same position, because every time I did the comments... the common segment of each video, you'll always see the moon above my head,
Right, okay,
basically.
yeah.
Or at least the last 5 or 6 episodes. But then if you walk into, the field where you fight, whichever final boss you're fighting, the moon sort of goes to the right of the great tree.
Yeah.
And then when the moon presence descends, it looks like you're facing the great tree, and then you turn around. You do a 180-degree turn, and then the moon is there.
I mean, I'm going to be Mr. Buzzkill here and say that they position the moon in different places to get the best dramatic shots. Like,
I think that the
And
skybox
also,
is the
wasn't there a
wrong
whole
size.
like bug with they bugged the skybox in the Hunter's Dream and it had to be? It's in one of the patches. They fixed it or something.
I don't remember.
Well, we'll talk about that later, but I did want to bring up a comment from a long time ago. It says 2 days
that's my
ago
old
there.
avatar.
But yeah, it's your old avatar. And back when I think in the episode I read out this comment, I referred to you as Jerks Sans
God,
Frontieres or something.
It's the worst decision I've ever made. That name.
I got it. I got it
but
immediately because I played Peace Walker.
Well,
I haven't
excuse
played
me.
Peace Walker.
You haven't played Peace Walker? You should. It's great.
No.
But
Yeah,
so
I
that
love
was one of the first comments, JSF, I think that you left
Yeah.
on this series, and it was interesting that you raised the possibility that the Shadows of Yharnam might be related in some way, shape, or form. I thought for some reason I had to open up the shortcut there, but I forgot I had already done that. But that they might be related in some way, shape, or form to the Keepers of from the Old Underground Labyrinth.
Yeah, and I think that even more now because I've done some testing.
Okay.
Well, in what way do you think they're related? Because I think they're definitely obviously related. But are you talking about something that I'm not aware of?
No, well, one thing I noticed, after I left that comment, is that when you're fighting the boss versions of the Shadows in, Forbidden Woods, when they summon the snake, when they summon the snake, they, kneel and they put their hand on the ground and there's this, aura around it. And it's exactly the same animation that the Keeper of the Old Lords does when it's summoning the fire for its second phase.
Oh.
And so, they've
cool.
got, katanas and stuff, and it's...
And also, at the time, I didn't quite dismiss it, but I just said, oh no, it's just that they are the Shadows of Yharnam. That it's sort of a play on
the
words.
reveal. Everybody misses the reveal because they backstabbed the pig. So
you mean of the
that
eyes?
pig?
Yeah.
That pig is the AI on that pig is coded specifically so that it's facing away and you attack it, and it doesn't do anything while you attack it, and then it instantly flips 180 and shows you the eyes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's very specifically coded that way.
I did some slow-mo on them in a little bit, but and that is something that I do want to talk about as well. But I also wanted to point out here that the Shadows are actually coded as
enemies of
they're not on the
Mensis,
same
yeah.
team. Yeah.
That was one of the very first lore things I discovered. To get fucking shit on to myself.
Yeah.
That was one of the first moments where I was like, oh wow, that's cool. Just while I was playing to myself.
I don't think I realized that until I watched Franz, a German Spies LP of this game. Until I realized that they were actually.
Well, I think what you're supposed. I think what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to run past them, and then the Shadows will turn around, and then you can start fighting them. I think that's what they intended you to do.
Yeah. And so just briefly to finish the thought that I had a minute ago is that. When JSF initially left that comment, one of the things I said was basically, oh no, well, I didn't quite say they were unrelated, but I guess I kind of implied it because I was I was
he
saying
hates that fucking Shadow.
Yeah.
He hates
I
it.
was saying that, no, it's because they're Yharnam's bodyguards, but the Keepers keep the Old Lords in the Old Underground Labyrinth. And so they're both, and Yharnam, as we saw in the previous episode, that's obviously the place she calls home.
The obvious difference being that the Shadows are specifically male and the Keepers are specifically female. And gender has...
Oh, touche, yeah.
I hadn't noticed the Shadows had a gender.
As far as we know, Thumerians have gender because they have specific gender distinctions. And if you had to pin the Shadows as one,
the voice
I think they're specifically male.
Okay.
Whereas the Keepers all have female voices.
The way they scream when they're going to their second phase in particular.
Yeah, and they also have female character models. So...
And the other thing too that you pointed out in that comment, which is no longer on the screen, so I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but about that it seems like the keepers sort of had their corporeal form.
Well, yeah, they're described as being like burned up.
I mean, I think the idea is, I guarantee you, like, if we took off their mask, it would just be like fire and ash inside of the armor.
Yeah.
Like, that's control. I don't think there's actually, like, a person in there anymore.
Or
Well, yeah,
even
and-
just nothing.
Yeah, or
Like-
just nothing. Yeah, just like animated
The
armor.
spot on the mask when the player uses it, like it's just their eye holes, but when you see the keepers, like their eyes are actually red.
Oh, can you see the eye holes of the player when you're wearing the mask?
Well,
No, you can't, because it replaces your head entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this, I never noticed this before. It looks like a standing stone.
Isn't that the Nightmare Frontier?
Is it?
Well, you can see the Nightmare of Mensis from the Nightmare Frontier, so it makes sense.
Yeah, I
if you
think
can see
that's
the
like
Nightmare.
one of the big obelisk things that's poking out from
looks
like
like
around
Yeah.
Amygdala's
It looks
chamber.
like one.
Yeah, because that was the only feature in the landscape. Because yeah, I knew that you could see the Nightmare of or you could see Mergo's Loft from
exactly.
the Frontier. But I couldn't recall whether the same was true the other way around. But that was the only feature of the landscape that really jumped out at me. But yeah, I got a little Shaman Boneblade happy here, and
Dude, everyone should get Shaman Boneblade happy. It's the
I
best
love
item in the
Shaman
game.
Boneblade.
it's just such a pain that you can only carry 3. And
I was genuinely disappointed that this mechanic didn't make it into Dark Souls 3. But
Yeah, it is. There's
well-
a pyromancy.
yeah,
no, but it's like an item.
rapport.
Oh, yeah.
And it also has the seeds, but we agreed that we wouldn't talk
We
about
agreed
Dark
we
Souls
wouldn't
3
talk
in
about
case
Dark Souls 3.
there's-
Okay.
We're not going to.
So just in case there's anyone who hasn't played it yet, and also Bloodborne deserves the respect of having its own finale. I don't know when we will start the Let's Talk Lore for Dark Souls 3. It'll likely be later in the summer when I've done my comprehensive exams, but that is in the works, and I do hope that you two will join me for
Yep.
a few of those
Yeah,
episodes.
I'll do it. I mean, yeah, why not?
But yeah, I was just obsessing over this
Yeah,
here,
it's
not
cool that
not
you can see it from so
Yeah.
far away.
Yeah.
because everything else is just fog and mountains basically.
Crags.
But I wonder. Presumably we're seeing a similar effect. Although no, I was thinking about how in the DLC you could see down.
No, these
but
are
not up.
on the same level, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mergo's
it's the
Loft
same.
and, like, the big question about Mergo's Loft is this place real somewhere? Like, if you go to Lauren, like the ruins of Lauren,
Yeah.
would you find an old castle like this that's just been beaten to shit? And if so, what would be the differences? Or is it just completely in the nightmare of its own volition? I'm of the belief that
Or
if
is
you
it a copy of an existing place that we just never visit in the real world?
I'm of the belief that if you went to Lauren, you would find an old castle like this.
Yeah.
So I get absolutely wrecked by the shots here. Just
Aren't you like level
obliterated.
300? There's no excuse for this.
250.
There's no excuse for
250.
this.
Even get to level 250.
Chalice dungeons.
Chalice dungeons, man.
Oh,
Yep.
I know, but I mean, like, psychologically. Why would-
That's why I decided instead of doing 2 episodes, this and then a finale, that I was just gonna do
I mean,
the
my
one
character
because
is like 320 something.
yeah, I'm so
Exactly.
burnt out on Bloodborne. I should probably do the math, but on this character alone, I think I'm at 190 hours, and that's not including all the times I did save and restore, as well as the various episodes where I used secondary characters for it.
If you add up all my time, I've got something like 3,000 to 4,000 hours.
Yeah,
Oh my
same
God.
here. It's pretty ridiculous. Because yeah, there's a several.
I've played
builds that
this game a
deleted and
lot.
stuff, too. You and me both, but it's great game.
It's a good
just,
fucking
yeah,
game.
I'm at that point where and you can't really expect. It would be unfair
Hell,
to say
in a year from now, I'll probably go back and play it again. It's a great fucking
it's
game.
same thing with Dark Souls 1 and 2 as well. Just because there's a new one out doesn't mean you won't go back and play the old
I went back
one.
and
but-
I was
played
like,
them before
I'm
the
finding
new
this like more interesting than Dark Souls 3, honestly.
Oh
from
my
like a
god,
lore discussion point of view.
significantly. But we promised
Yeah.
we wouldn't talk about that.
Yeah.
And we're
Yes.
already breaking that
and
promise.
also, just briefly, that Dark Souls 3 is new, right? And so I think that there's still much to be discovered and discussed, and until then, I don't think you can really make a fair assessment of.
I can.
The backstab there is
sorry,
much too.
I'm just being a dick now. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
That's all right.
That's why we have you here, to balance out the nice guyness of JSF. So,
For the people watching, when the camera turns off, Aegon swears like a sailor. Don't believe the lies.
So what's the deal with the pigs?
They're fucking pigs. I don't know. They're spider
obviously,
pigs.
In contrast to the ones that we find in Yahargul in the pre-Blood Moon phase, that are like they're just enormous boars.
Well,
they're just pigs.
We know Yahargul liked pigs, and we know they liked spiders. So
so I never
pigs.
made that connection. Yeah, because they do see, like, they're spider pig eyes.
Well,
I guess?
are we going to connect them to like the crow-headed dogs and the dog-headed crows?
I would, yeah, and
these are the same thing. It's
and I'm pretty sure in the guide
Oh.
it actually says spider. It actually associates them with spiders. I think that's the idea behind it. Is that like. Just
so
like
they were just doing experimentation with all of these different animals?
Or whether it was
we don't know if that was
experimentation,
them or it was just
or
the
if it was just
Nightmare
like,
Scrambles
yeah,
things.
exactly. The nightmare just puts them together like that.
Because like I'm doing Bergenworth at the moment, and I'm talking about the whole scrambling species thing.
Okay.
It seems to be like an end result of whatever they did to get here.
Well, something that someone really pointed out to me once, which I found really interesting, was that in Bergenworth we have people with spider faces, and then in the Nightmare we have spiders with people faces.
Spiders with people faces.
Yeah,
And the ones here don't have Mensa's cages on, which makes me think those are ex-Bergenworth.
Oh.
Maybe.
That's very interesting, and relates a lot to I think it was your Hunter's Dream video, JSF, where you were talking about like the process of these dreams coming into I was going to say coming into being. I guess that's the right word, but whereby whoever or whatever it is responsible for kind of forming these places.
Just
that
existence and reality. It's sort of like a natural byproduct of how it works.
Mm-hmm. So, some time ago, Kelsey left a comment that pointed out that Queen Yharnam and her pillory cuffs, it was commonplace in the olden days, though I'm not certain during Victorian times, to bind women while they were giving birth. And as you see in her midsection there, she's recently given birth to Mergo. And she goes on to say that it was usually done in the early 1900s, drugging the woman for both painkillers and making it easier on doctors. Giving birth, it was just easier to bind women, though I doubt it was as heavy as a pillory, just cloth bindings on a bed. If you ever want, and so I replied and said that was simultaneously depressing and interesting, said if you ever want to be really depressed about the history state of birthing, check out the documentary The Business of Being Born. And while also adding that I guess they did regularly drug high-class women in the Victorian times when giving birth. Blessed chloroform. Though nothing on binding, so I might just be talking under my rear. Bloodborne does take the age as a sort of reference, but not a rule, though. And so, yeah, that got me thinking of something that came up when I was reading about A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones stuff, is that the setting, it seems almost, and this could also be made to apply to the Dark Souls series games as well, what Tolkien called, I believe, Second World?
Secondary world.
Yeah.
Secondary world, where it's like the Earth, but it's not at the same time.
It's like the Earth, but there's different names for the countries and stuff, just so that...
And there's also magical things, right?
It shows you a place and a setting, and your mind goes, okay, I'm familiar with how this world should operate. Like, if it shows you a medieval fantasy thing, you're like, okay, there's going to be knights with swords, there's going to be dudes riding horses, there's going to be flags with crests on them, and your mind just sort of fills in the information, and then you get to enjoy, like, the the kingdom
so
of what
it's a very useful literary device, for sure.
Totally.
In helping the reader kind of get a grasp on what the world is trying to communicate.
Yeah.
So I don't think it really matters necessarily that they didn't
Also,
specifically use...
Speaking real quick on her bindings, she can break them easily.
Yeah, we saw that in the previous episode.
She just snaps them in half as soon as she realizes you're a threat. So they're not there to bind her. What are they for? If it's ceremonial or if it's for childbirth or something, it's clearly not like a restraint that is keeping her prisoner, because she can break it no problem.
But so I guess the next question would be, because she is a woman with superhuman strength, like the rest of the Tumerians, but even more so because she's the leader of the Tumerians, ostensibly, why doesn't she just kind of go up the elevator and reclaim Mergo for herself?
Well, see, if you... That isn't... Here we go. Whether that is actually Yharnam or a projection of Yharnam...
touche.
It is a projection, and I can tell you...
When you fight Yharnam, she spawns clones of herself that have 1 hit point.
Yeah,
if you nudge them, they just disappear.
And
So
the clones
it looks
aren't
like-
pregnant, whereas she is. When
Exactly,
you fight the real
yeah.
her.
That's what I was
That's how
gonna
you
say.
tell the difference between
Right,
them. Yeah.
neither are the ones
Yeah.
that you encounter in the Moonside Lake or right here. They're not swollen with child.
But it's interesting that she... Because I don't believe the ones during the boss fight, and I should remember this, but I don't believe the clones
Have the blood on them. I don't think they do. I have
on
to go
their
back and check,
midsection.
though.
So it's interesting that she would choose to project herself in that state, but... So, there's Mergo, I guess.
Nah, just a courage. There ain't nothing in there.
Well,
And
Well, what?
Well,
There's nothing in
but-
there. It's fucking empty.
yeah, but we've had this discussion before.
that it has to do with the fact that, you know, they don't want to make a video game
I
where you're...
think, honestly, it might have been Mergo is implied to be in the stroller, and the reason
Well,
we
hold on
don't
a sec. We're
see...
talking about the series that has a pool of aborted fetuses which rise up to attack you.
Yeah, but they're not human children. Mm-hmm. The thing is,
Oh,
like, it's the
come
same thing with
on.
No, Gascoigne's daughter, right? When Gascoigne's daughter, she will never reach Erden Chapel. She will reach Iosefka's clinic where you can kill her as a Celestial.
Yeah.
So I'm honestly thinking they just didn't want to run into a situation where you could murder children in a video game. Because if Mergo was in that stroller, like, flopping around everywhere, that's not going to look good.
That's ridiculous.
It's the same thing when you're playing, like, Fallout 4
Yeah,
or Skyrim or something.
Or Fallout
That's
3, like, there's a whole, like Lost Boys situation with all these children in Fallout 3, and they're all invincible.
Yeah,
Because
in
they don't want
Fallout
to get
2,
in trouble with...
Fallout 2, you could kill children, and if you did, you got a special child killer perk. That was
No,
like everybody hates you now.
but in Fallout 2 you could kill children if you had the non-German version. If you had the German version, they just went through and erased all the children.
That's true.
Yeah,
so
and
I
so-
think it honestly, that's... Because why... If Mergo is completely formless, why is there a stroller?
Because Mergo's
basically?
not completely formless. Mergo's the fucking wet nurse.
Okay, go on.
Fuck off! What do you mean, go on? You guys read the Paleblood Hunt, right?
Yes.
Did you really, or are you just bullshitting
It was
me
like...
right now?
It was like 6 months
Okay.
ago.
No. So
We have to read as a job.
For a living,
Like,
yeah,
we
exactly.
forget things.
My best friend wrote a book, and I've still not read it yet.
Okay.
And I've had a copy for like 3 months.
So, I guess we'll have plenty of time to talk about the wet nurse, but there's a couple
Yeah.
of really weird things about the wet nurse. So, in the beginning, when the game first came out, the wet nurse could bleed. Like, you would hit her and she would bleed. But somewhere along the line, I don't know what patch, they changed it, or they fixed it or something, so that she doesn't bleed at all. She's just this sort of mist. Like, the same thing that happens when you kill the ghosts in Canehurst. There's just like this mist effect.
Or Gehrman in
And,
Hunter's
and
Dream.
when you kill the wet nurse, you don't get anything. You don't get any blood echoes, you don't get any message, you get nothing. It's not until Mergo dies that you get anything at all. And it's not like the orphan, where you kill the sort of nightmare reflection of the orphan, you get prey slaughter and you get a bunch of echoes, and then you kill the sort of shadow of it and you get the nightmare slain. The Mergo, the way I view it is the wet nurse is the last little shard of Mergo's consciousness, that it sort of created this mother figure to protect itself. That's my view. You don't have to buy into that. I think it makes the most sense. I think the wet nurse is fucking weird, but I think that's the best way to explain it.
But that's plausible. I would buy
it
that.
Is.
That it creates this, because his mother's obviously not with him. So that actually makes perfect sense.
Or it's Uden because it's formless.
But we'll talk about that. Yeah, we got plenty of time to talk about that a little bit later. So, every Great One loses its child and then yearns for a surrogate. This chord granted Mensis audience with Mergo, but resulted in the stillbirth of their brains. So which one of you guys wants to explain that, or try to explain that?
You want to take this?
Oh, yeah, stillbirth of their brains is a really, really weird phrase.
I think it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but it's
that
it's
they
just,
were trying to line
like,
their brain with eyes, but it didn't work.
Yeah. It could refer to that. It could refer to Mensis' own brains, or it could refer to both of them, or neither, or one.
I think that's how you give birth to the brain of Mensis.
Yeah.
Which, is a legitimate Great One, as it says in the one item description,
the living
but
string.
obviously something went awry there.
Yeah.
And so on the note of Yharnam as being a projection,
Are you going to kill her now? Or?
You can't. He's going to walk down, she'll bow, and then she'll fade away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think both of you have talked about this at one point or another, in either video or text form, but that it does seem as though she's expressing her gratitude to you, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, again, even though she's a projection, her projection's in the boss fight in the previous episode, as we saw, so you can see her bowing here.
So she's great.
But because she could do damage, her projections could damage you.
Yep.
So theoretically, she could have.
Well, also
done the
she's
same
kind
here.
of a pushover, right? Like the headless bloodletting beast that you fight right before her.
Yeah, that's hard.
Way harder.
Yeah.
That's the real final boss of the Chalice Dungeon. She's kind of
So
a
briefly,
pushover. Oh, are we going to talk
something
about
that-
this?
We talked
Oh,
about
God.
very early on in the series is Iosefka's blood vial. And something I've seen in many places. So just to review, it says that it's the product of a slow and careful refinement process, and it's a rare blood vial which appears to be a clinic original. And so I've seen in many, many places. Don't think about it too much. It's the only reason it's there is for gameplay reasons. And so what I'm about to show everyone here is a demonstration that it is not for gameplay reasons. In my mind, without a shadow of a doubt, that right there proves that it is not for gameplay reasons. Because it only heals slightly more than a normal blood vial. And so by contrast, this isn't really a spoiler, but in Dark Souls 3, you can only carry one Divine Blessing at a time. But at least the Divine Blessing actually heals you entirely, and it cures status effects. This does none of those things. It's just a slightly better version of the blood vial. And so if you can only carry one, I don't see how this can be just a gameplay thing.
The same thing happens if you kill Celestial Iosefka, because she'll drop a vial. And if you've already got one on you won't be able to pick it up.
Yep.
I think it serves two things. I think it definitely serves a very important gameplay function, which is that it reminds you, hey, you might want to go check on Iosefka's clinic. And if you missed her cord,
Yeah.
it's a very good way to remind you to maybe go back and check on her because you're at the end of the game. Now,
that's brilliant.
That, I think,
That's
is a
brilliant.
very big gameplay reason why that's there. As far
Okay,
as lore
okay, fair
goes,
enough.
I think that's super important because I think that is the smoking gun that Iosefka is not the one true pure soul waifu that we think she is, and that the real Iosefka was also a monster just like the fake one. That's just me, though.
Maybe.
So I don't know
Okay.
Sorry, go on, JSF.
Okay. I just had someone comment that, like, maybe another hunter came to the nightmare with Iosefka's blood vial and they got captured and they put the vial there.
You know what? It's fucking possible.
Yeah.
Although, why would
Yeah.
they keep it? Like, right?
And
Well,
also,
it's unique
It does
blood.
heal slightly more than a normal blood vial, so...
barely though, barely. And at this point in the game, you're likely to have access to runes, which will give you 2 or 3 more blood vials. So like,
The
I
genius
don't think
Dr.
it's
Iosefka who created a slightly better blood vial.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's like, because I honestly can't really think of any lore reasons for it, but I certainly don't think it's there solely to give you better healing for the boss fight, because it's just not an item that is incredibly useful from a gameplay
If we're going to
perspective.
talk about it being there only for gameplay, it's there specifically so that the player remembers
To remind
Iosefka
you.
exists.
Yeah.
And so if you've completely ignored her the entire time, you'll go back and you'll check that out and you'll see,
that's
wow, there's
that's
actually
definitely
a
the
thing.
best explanation I've heard, I think.
If we're going on gameplay alone, that's the reason. But I think it also serves a very important lore function.
Which, we'll talk about very shortly. I was just checking out the braziers and stuff here in the boss room, because it's not really a boss room I've really spent all that much time looking at before. And you can also see the pieces of Mergo's stroller there. Which,
Yeah.
yeah.
They'll
I guess
disappear if you reload one thing. Gehrman's left the oven on.
Oh,
Yeah.
the old man's finally gone senile.
Gehrman's getting kind of old.
Now we're going to have
So
to put
this
him
is
in a
something
home.
we'll talk about after the doll explains kind of explains what's going on.
Good hunter, you have come. Dawn will soon break. This night and this dream will end. Gehrman awaits you at the foot of the great tree. Farewell, good hunter. May you find your worth in the waking world.
So can you guys explain what that noise is that I was just?
It's crackling fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I guess maybe other than just being ignorant or whatever, is.
Have you never been in a burning building before?
Although, real quick, I just want to give credit where credit is due. Never in the history of a video game has a game managed to say, "Hey, by the way, you're at the final boss," without a prompt. Because a lot of games will be like, "Warning: if you go past this point, you will not be able to continue. Would you like to save your game?" Never has a game like you go back and your hub is on fire. And it's like, go to this boss arena. Never has a game managed to successfully convey to me the message of, hey, you want to wrap anything up?
Within like a split second of warping there, too.
Split second of the thing loading in, you're just like, oh, okay.
And so what I was just doing there was I was trying to see whether there was anything on the... Because, like...
no, it's just fire crackling, dude.
I actually put on my headphones, but it's coming from a very specific spot, so I didn't...
It's coming from wherever the sound engineer put the invisible sound generator.
The invisible speaker
wherever
or something
the fuck
like
it's
that.
called, I don't know.
And also, like, you'd think, like, fire crackling, you would associate that with the building actually burning down and not being normal on the inside.
You want to know something I really wish they had done? I wish the burial blade would be missing.
Yeah.
So to escape this dreadful hunter's dream, halt the source of the spreading scourge of beasts, lest the night carry on forever. So the reason we're looking at this here is that in the, I think it was the first episode of the series, I mentioned that there could potentially be a meta-narrative in terms of the game's first ending. So, and it relates to this as well. Trick weapon wielded by Gehrman, the first hunter. A masterpiece that defined the entire array of weapons crafted at the workshop. Its blade is forged with siderite, said to have fallen from the heavens. Gehrman surely saw the hunt as a dirge of farewell, wishing only that his prey might rest in peace, never again to awaken to another harrowing nightmare. And so then the next piece of evidence that we're about to look at is the percentage of players who have gotten each of the three endings. And so the least popular of the three endings is the one that we're about to get, which is Yharnam Sunrise, which, you could say is the ending that, because all throughout the game, Gehrman is portraying the hunter's dream. Oh, it's the terrible hunter's dream. And that note there, which I think was left by Gehrman, conveys a very similar message.
I have seen a remarkable number of people who have stated their very firm belief that is the good ending. That is the good ending. Yes.
Well, I don't think any of them are good, but I do see the merits.
But I have seen so many people, like in comments or stuff, saying that they think that's the best ending.
Well, because you don't break the cycle.
No.
You don't free Gehrman.
You do nothing.
But what I think might be happening here is a sort of reverse psychology, where Gehrman's saying, because he wants to be free, like we hear him when he's sleep talking, he wants to be freed of these shackles of the hunter's dream, of the moon presence. And so you see here the moon. It makes no sense. See how it's moving?
Yeah.
It makes no sense at all. And so keep in mind that throughout the entire series, I've been doing the comments with the stairs to the left of the workshop building, and there's the seam in the skybox.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking might explain that is that the seam, like the skybox, doesn't fit the size of the world.
Yeah. You know what?
And that as a result of that, the moon seems to move when it shouldn't actually be moving.
That's very Lovecraftian. Like, to be perfectly honest with you.
Is it actually?
Impossible space is something that is used in
non-Euclidean
geometry.
Is a very nice way to explain away gameplay glitches.
Well, I mean, they do that in the Hunter's Nightmare too, where you're at the Grand Cathedral and then you turn around and go through a door and you're back in the beginning and there's another Grand Cathedral over there. So
and it's not supposed to make sense. Same thing with the skull.
And if you really love
Impossible
Space, try playing Dark Souls 2, which is a very Lovecraftian game in level design.
A very Lovecraftian example of screwed up development cycle, I guess.
Yeah.
Impossible development cycles. But
they did the best they could.
But so just to briefly wrap up my theory, which I guess we can talk a little bit more about in the credits. that it's almost as though Miyazaki or the FromSoft in general is talking through Gehrman and saying, "Oh, don't you want to be freed from this terrible hunter's dream? I can show you mercy." And sort of playing on this sort of, masculine, hyper-masculine gamer notion of, no, I want to get the best ending.
I think if there is a meta-narrative, it's what Gehrman says to you in the very beginning, which is, don't think too hard about this, just go out and slay a few beasts. It's just what you hunters do. And that's what 99% of people who play this game do. Is they go and they just play through the game and they do whatever,
they beat it once.
They never think about it ever. About anything
that's fair, yeah. But I do think there's maybe something to that. But when I stated that in the first episode, I was much more confident about that than I am now. But we'll talk about that. But first, Gehrman. Hi, friend.
Good hunter, you've done well. The night is near its end. Now, I will show you mercy. You will die, forget the dream, and awake under the morning sun. You will be freed from this terrible hunter's dream. Farewell, my keen hunter. Fear the blood.
Farewell, good hunter. May you find your worth in the waking world.
Okay, so just briefly, just to kind of expand. I guess there's not really much to expand on, but the whole game kind of this is being hammered home. The notion that it's terrible to be trapped in the hunter's dream, and it's so terrible. I will show you mercy. And, the typical gamer, and this is really borne out by the trophy stats for the 3 endings, that it is by far the lowest number of players. I think it's, we was just on the screen like a minute ago, I've already forgotten, but I think it was something like 11.8%.
13 point something, whereas the others had like 18 point something.
Yeah, and the other two are only off by like a percentage point, and then there's like 5 or 6% difference between those two and this ending. But it could also just be that people are looking on the wiki and seeing, okay, this is the special ending or whatever, however it's listed on the Fix Your Life wiki. And then just, because I imagine that most people probably just look at guides when they're playing, right?
I don't know the statistics.
Chicago
on that.
Yamamura, special thanks.
Chicago Yamamura, special thanks for
Yamamura.
giving me the most headaches in my life. Trying to figure out who the fuck you are. Special thanks for fucking giving me a migraine.
Give you your start with the lore hunting of Bloodborne, right? So
yes, that is true.
At least that came out of it.
That is true.
But yeah, so this ending doesn't really change anything, and but the thing that I do find really interesting about it is that
fucking awesome.
It is
It's
awesome.
so cool. Oh my god, it's beautiful.
The thing that I find amazing about it is the idea that, much like Jura and Eileen, our character's just going to be out in the world now.
Well, here's the thing, and there's a gameplay thing, which is that presumably, if you refuse and you fight Gehrman and he kills you, story-wise, that ending would happen to you.
Yeah, you should wake up.
You should wake up. But obviously they're not going to make you play through the whole game again. So I think, so it's not clear if Jura, I'm sure
you mean if you fight him and he kills you in the course of the boss fight?
Yes.
Yeah, you should wake up.
Because he doesn't behead you, though.
He doesn't. I think that's just symbolic.
But if the hunter's dream, it says mind, but elsewhere it says brain. That if the hunter's dream, if the hunter's mark is branded on the back of your brain, and if Sideright is this material that fell from the heavens.
Oh, okay.
I see where you're
so
going
if he
with
uses
this.
that seems to me by far to be the most likely explanation.
But we don't behead Gehrman,
right?
And he wakes up, and
yeah.
I think it
true.
just has to be two Paleblood hunters. The only way to sever the connection is for one of them to kill the other.
But so how about this? So we don't behead Gehrman.
No.
But after we kill Gehrman, as we'll see in 10 minutes or something, after we kill Gehrman, the moon presence comes down and basically decides, okay, you are a more fit person to watch or to preside over the hunter's dream.
Yeah.
So if the moon presence is the person or the great one responsible for branding us with the hunter's mark to begin with, and if the moon presence is also the person who trapped Gehrman there to begin with, then I see no reason why the moon presence couldn't just say, oh, actually I like you better because you killed him, and I'm gonna take your leg, and then you're gonna watch over things from now on. Am I completely out to lunch on that?
You totally have a
that's
solid
fine.
point. I think it's just. It feels like Gehrman killing you is what wakes you up, and it's not. It's not like some special ritual. He does it ritualistically. He does it in the most painless way possible, which is very fitting to his character. Which is his character is about mercy. He beheads you from behind. It's instant. It goes right through the brainstem. You're dead in an instant. That's why executions were done that way. And that fits his character. Because presumably your character feels pain and feels death, even though they come back.
Sorry, here's the other thing, and we'll probably have to talk about this a little bit more later on. But here's the other thing that he says you will forget the dream, and you will wake up and under the morning sun you won't remember these things, and yet
Eileen and Jura
both Eileen and Jura clearly remember.
Well, and Mikolash forgets, but then the doll specifically says this.
Mikolash says he's going to forget, yeah, but we don't know if he actually forgets.
The doll says that you'll awake and the dream will be a fond, distant memory.
Right.
So I think it's meant to be more like when you have a dream in real life. You remember bits and pieces of it, but you very rarely remember the whole thing.
Well, Redgrave, you argued that in your video on the Hunter's Mark,
and I
right?
argued that in Paleblood at the very beginning.
And I remember... I remember you put it really. I don't recall exactly how you put it. I don't know if you remember either. But the way you articulated it about how that's what the Bolt Hunter's Mark is that it's a former Paleblood hunter who is scribbling the Hunter's Mark because it's trying to remember, and so it's almost like a symbol of what it is they went through.
Yeah.
In more ways than one.
And they fixate on it. Because I mean, I don't know about you, but whenever I have a weird dream or something, I write it down.
On Facebook.
I do it on Facebook a lot. And
yes, you do.
What are you complaining about my Facebook statuses for? But I also just do it in general.
I record my sleep talks.
Oh, that's weird.
Because I sleep talk a lot.
I'm sorry, that was rude of me.
Well, no, it's there are a lot of them, and I'm reasonably certain that I have something like 20 or 25 of them that relate either to Dark Souls or to Bloodborne.
Nice.
So maybe I'll cut one of them
Sign
in.
and seal.
But I said something about Master Willem in one of my. Yeah.
Were you begging him to unshackle you?
I don't remember exactly what it was.
Oh, Lawrence, Master Willem.
Well, but part of the problem is that I'm often playing Souls games before I go to sleep. So then,
I mean,
yeah,
I dream about games I've been playing. I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Like I was playing Drakengard the other day, and I had a dream about it.
So, another thing, Redgrave, that I believe it was.
Oh, be careful.
I believe I was stalking you on Reddit or something, and you replied in a comment to someone else about New Game Plus and how, the person asked, like, it was the dream real, and you replied and said something to the effect of, well, in New Game Plus, we wake up and we're not wearing the foreigner set anymore.
Yeah, so, like, was it all a dream? That's a very, like, real question to ask. And my response to that is usually, even if it was a dream, that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yes.
And
and it may have all been a dream, but not a dream in the sense of, everyday
something
life.
that is very important is that not in New Game Plus is what you're talking about, in the Yharnam Sunrise ending, in the ending cutscene, you don't wake up in the foreign garb.
Yeah.
Because New Game Plus, there's really no way to explain.
New Game Plus is just New Game Plus.
Yeah.
But
New Game Plus falls under, so remember that graph that we've talked about in several
But in the Yharnam
episodes.
Sunrise cutscene, you don't wake up.
Ah, you found yourself a hunter.
But yeah, so that makes a lot more sense, because I was trying to remember where it was I read you having said
I've said it a
something
million
like that.
times. People ask me the same question all the time. I'm used to it.
Because, and this is something that I talked about I guess I didn't really talk about all that much in this playthrough, but about how because it's a video game, because, once again, you can never close up that last little bit of gameplay and story, if insofar as the story is cyclical, that one night of the hunt ends and then another one begins, which is kind of, I've argued that throughout the playthrough, but the developers still at a certain point have to say, this is the slice of time that you'll be playing.
Right.
So, I think it's something like Dragon Age Origins, where, like, if you beat the final boss in New Game Plus, you become, like, when you fight the final boss, they're wearing whatever it was that you were wearing or something to that effect.
In one of the DLC expansion packs in Dragon Age Origins, it uses some of the equipment you were wearing in a different campaign.
Yeah,
and like, so, Dragon's Dogma, I think you mean.
Oh,
Dragon's Dogma is the one you're thinking of, but Dragon Age Origins does something similar.
Okay. So, and I've never played either of those games, so I don't know how I actually know that, but so they have to say at a certain point, okay, this is where the story begins, this is where it ends. But if you imagine that the story actually continues, then, your player character under this ending would technically be out there in the world somewhere. So we're back in the Hunter's Dream, and even though we have 15 insight, the doll is
she's just being stuck up right now.
Yeah.
She's just not in.
But that's because they plan for you to return once, get the weapons, and like the workshop is shut too. But then when we return again. So when you make your second trip there, then she's back.
I think the reason for that is that it is technically possible to accumulate insight before ever going to the dream.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they wanted to make sure that on your first time there, you always see the abandoned doll first.
Yeah, they scripted that sequence, and so what you can see here
Is you going for the Easter egg.
I didn't realize that I had to do something else before she would actually move from that spot. So I was like, okay, maybe if I talk dialogue. And so the other thing I'm doing too is you have to turn your camera during the last little bit of loading in order to actually see it, because if you're just facing forward when it loads, and so that's why my camera's spinning so fast, but if you actually are facing forward when it loads, by the time you turn around, she's already standing up. But so the reason I'm doing this is that, yeah, for anyone who hasn't actually done New Game Plus yet, but yeah, if you've not done New Game Plus, you might not know that, yeah, the same way that the doll prays at what is essentially Lady Maria's grave, the gravestone that we use to enter the Old Hunters DLC, she basically splits her, I don't know if it's a 50-50 split, but in New Game Plus, she actually splits her time between the two gravestones. And half of the time after you've triggered it, which we're about to do, half of the time she is praying at your gravestone, technically, from New Game, and half of it is she's praying at Lady Maria's gravestone. But again,
it's a cool little Easter egg.
Little Easter egg, but New Game Plus in this game doesn't really make a lot of sense in terms of...
And also, she doesn't recognize you.
Yes.
So she doesn't recognize you if you kill her either.
Oh, that's true.
But yeah, New Game Plus, it's just a fun little Easter egg. I don't think there's anything to take from that.
And you know what? I'm now thinking, I don't think I've gone even, and because New Game Plus, I was very disappointed in that in Bloodborne. I don't think I ever went to New Game Plus 2. Does a second gravestone show up when you're in New Game Plus 2? No, just the one? Oh, that's kind of disappointing.
If it's like the skeletons in Dark Souls 2, how in every subsequent playthrough of Dark Souls 2, there's another skeleton in that little room.
Or you could just use a bonfire aesthetic as well.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, so here, well, you'll see what I'm trying to do here in a minute and 30 seconds. But this guy here has a very interesting idle animation, and I'm not sure if either of you have seen it before, or I'm sure you've seen it, because I was sure that I had seen it before, but it wasn't until someone made a post on Reddit. I think someone named Ace of something or other. But I actually have the comment will pop up in a minute. But so I was trying to trigger his idle animation, but this guy actually just has a path that he just walks back and forth. And he doesn't actually engage in the idle animation, as I soon found out. But so yeah, so before we trigger that little Easter egg, I wanted to, because this is something that I've had on for each episode I have sort of a list of things I want to talk about, and I've had a list of loose ends with 5 or 6 items on them in the last 10 or so episodes, and this was the last thing on the list, so I decided I absolutely had to get it in this episode, and thankfully, yeah, well, you guys will see in just a minute. Okay, so that is, at its most basic level, just an idle animation that is no different than that which Sonic the Hedgehog does in Sonic the Hedgehog 1991, the Sega Genesis. That if you don't touch the controller, Sonic gets impatient with you because, he's got so much 90s too.
Yeah, exactly.
And his idle animation kicks in. And so, but what makes the animation on the left special, and the one on the right, just an idle animation, is the lore. And that is, of course, as we learned in the Old Hunters DLC, that a widespread belief of the period was that beast blood crept up the right leg. And so I think it's really interesting that this was that animation was in the game prior to the Old Hunters DLC. And here's the I just wanted to give credit to the person who I was just on Reddit, and even though the post only got 9 upvotes, I thought it was brilliant. It was something that I just had to talk about. That was in the game when the game first came out, but we had no way of knowing that it was anything other than just a simple idle animation. When in fact it appears as though these huntsmen who throughout the game are screaming at us, and well, JSF, you do the voice better than anyone.
Out of here, you beast!
This town is cursed. Away!
So yeah, like they're kind of out of their mind, and I guess that's another.
You're finished.
Yharnam's done for.
This town is cursed.
And yeah, so I thought that was just really, really cool. A really amazing and detail-oriented piece of game design.
A lot of people ever ask me if I ever think I'm overanalyzing the lore. And my response is probably.
Probably.
And I think that this is a case of overanalyzing the lore, but it's fine because it adds to the game. Like, whether or not the developers intended for that to be beast blood creeping up the right leg and we're going to have this develop, it doesn't matter if they intended for it or not. That's the game they made. And what they made was an idle animation that is super cool and super rich with lore and is cool to speculate. And whether they intended it or not, or were just overanalyzing, doesn't really matter because it's super cool. You know?
And another thing too is that it's also possible that maybe when they were designing the Old Hunter's trousers, that they looked at that animation and said, "Oh, like that's cool. We can just say that beast blood crept up the right leg." Yeah. But there's so much of that, like, because again, something we talked about in episode 25, Canehurst, is that the horsemen in leading up to Annalise's chamber. That's
gotta be unintentional. I can't imagine that's intentional. It just looks so bad. It looks so badly done.
And what JSF and I surmised in that episode was that maybe they got like a deal at like the Stirrup Emporium or something. Like,
I mean, as much as we love to think
Stirrup.
that everything's been planned out for us.
Oh yeah, so you can see here that she's praying at what we now know to be Lady Maria's, a grave that represents Lady Maria.
We now believe
it's Lady Maria.
Yes,
it's like, but
it's like 90 to
95%.
Right?
Yeah. And then when we really reload there was I think like 8 or 9 reloads.
Cool little Easter egg.
Yep.
That's all I would say about it. It's a cool little Easter egg.
No, yeah. I'm not saying it's anything more, but it's something that, if there's anyone, because, there are people who have left comments and said that they've never played Bloodborne, but they enjoyed watching the series because of how thorough it is and how much of the game we've kind of gone through. And so this is, just one of those little things that I always thought was really cool, so I wanted to show it off.
Yeah, I really like it.
It's also, I think, the exact same model for the gravestone. That is used for the, quote-unquote, Lady Maria gravestone up at the top there.
It might be. I don't know, actually.
And something else, I guess, worthy of note.
It definitely looks like the same model, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same, yeah. And also that the chalice dungeons basically remain the same, irrespective of the new game cycle you're currently in.
You want to hear a story about how annoyed I was? I didn't know that. I thought I would that the chalices would all get ramped up in difficulty if I went to New Game Plus. So guess what I did before beating the game the first time? I did all of the Chalice dungeons.
To make sure they all...
Because I figured it was just like any other Souls game, and they would just be beefed up in difficulty. Keep in mind, I didn't read any promotional material before the game was coming out, so I didn't know what the fuck a Chalice dungeon was. I thought they were just other areas.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and the way that they're set up with the gravestones and everything opposite the other gravestones, yeah. I still love the Chalice dungeons. I'm on record as saying that in this series, but
they're awesome.
But there are certainly lots of missed opportunities.
Yes. Definitely.
Definitely.
So, if it's not obvious to anyone who's wondering, what I did after we beat, it's not cheating for a playthrough. After we beat Mergo, or after we beat the wet nurse, which yes, something we still have to keep in mind to talk about. I in between warping to the Hunter's Dream and when you saw me quote unquote warp into the Hunter's Dream, I backed up the saves so that we could restore to this point, and so then that way we could see all three of the endings.
Good hunter, you've done well. The night is near its end. Now, I will show you mercy. You will die, forget the dream, and awake under the morning sun. You will be freed from this terrible hunter's dream. Dear, oh dear, what was it? The hunt, the blood, or the horrible dream? Oh, it doesn't matter. It always comes down to the hunter's helper to clean up after these sorts of messes. Tonight, Gehrman joins the hunt.
And so, the hunt begins again.
So, like we were talking about in the for the credits for the previous ending, the way I see it and the way I was trying to articulate it was that even though we didn't behead Gehrman. Well, first thing to note, I guess, would be that when you kill him, he says the night and the dream were long. So he's been trapped there for some time, and it seems as though we freed him unintentionally by virtue of becoming, what is it, the I don't know if the trophy description is canon at all, but it says that we are captivated by the moon presence, and it's called honoring wishes, I believe. So that basically we take Gehrman's place. And something that you pointed out, JSF, in the comments of a previous episode, but also in your Bloodborne Up Close in the Hunter's Dream, is that if you're wearing something like Arianna's shoes, you can see very clearly that we are missing one of our legs.
We are indeed, but it's the opposite one to the one Gehrman is missing, weirdly.
Which is really
weird.
Really strange.
Super weird.
And I do wonder whether maybe they just flipped the image or something.
It makes me
like
think
that.
that some
Might have.
Twilight Princess shit is going on, and they just flipped
Yeah.
it. Special thanks, Chikage Imamura.
Yep.
Because that makes no sense. And something else that I mentioned during the boss fight that you guys wouldn't have heard is that you can actually see, even though Gehrman stands up and gets bigger and wears a whole different cape and a hat and all that stuff, he's still limping.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't know how to explain that other than just there seems to be, the moon presence has some sort of thing for symbolically, trapping these people, whether the player character or Gehrman in the dream.
That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, that even though, presumably maybe, because I don't know how else to explain his sudden transformation, that the moon presence is like, okay, you can have your powers back temporarily.
When you look at how drastically different his outfit is, it makes me feel like, he's been revitalized. He's gotten his old gear back. He's got his weapon. I really wish they had done something where just a slight model change. For those of you who don't know, you can see the burial blade in the fucking Hunter's Dream. And I wish it's hung on the mantle, where, like my grandfather was a soldier, hung his military saber on the mantle. Mm-hmm. And I really wish that, the burial blade was missing. I think that would be so great.
So cool.
Yeah, it would.
The burial blade, I believe we don't actually see it in the abandoned old...
No, you don't. It is not there.
Yeah, which is interesting. And I don't know, maybe it was looted, and I think I discussed that in episode 11.
Well, if you look in the Healing
ago,
Church workshop, there's a bunch of stuff that is also in the Hunter's Dream hanging from the ceiling. So possibly
mostly serrated
weapons,
weapons,
so possibly they just repurposed everything and they looted it, because all the books are out and everything. So.
But Gehrman's limping during the boss fight, so it's almost as though the moon presence says, okay, you need to fight this guy. So you can have your powers back temporarily.
But don't forget you're still my bitch, basically.
Don't forget you're still supposed to watch over, you're still mine, basically. You're still under my control. So, the limp is almost like a subtle reminder of that. I guess the other thing to note would be that much like Lady Maria, which makes sense, that Gehrman has natural quickening. You saw there, I very unprofitably used the old Hunter's Bone.
You gotta use the old Hunter's Bone when you fight Gehrman and when you fight Maria. You gotta do it.
And I did that for both of those fights in this playthrough.
It's the sickest
it wasn't
shit.
Pretty.
You get the sickest Devil May Cry flashback shit. It's the best. I love it.
But he doesn't actually use it the whole time though.
No, he doesn't.
Which is interesting. Sort of beats himself up is this only during the second phase, right? Mm.
And then in the third phase, it's even better. It's even faster.
So with the two endings we've seen so far, insofar as there is a cycle to the dream, and that these hunts just recur over and over again, the first two endings in no way, shape, or form break that cycle.
And by the way, there are hundreds of graves. So how long has this cycle been going on? I would reckon and say it's been going on since way before Gehrman.
Yeah. So, well, JSF, you actually counted the graves, didn't
No,
you?
that wasn't me. That was someone who left a
I
comment.
want to say there's
and counted.
something
okay.
like 373, but I could be off. It's been a while.
But it's not entirely clear whether those are the graves of past Paleblood hunters, though, right?
I mean, I think they are. They're not in
What
the
else would
waking
they
world.
be?
They're not in the waking world.
Yeah.
In fact, that
But they're
whole
also
garden
different.
isn't in the waking world.
Yeah, the tree is.
Yeah.
The tree is,
Like
but the garden
I
isn't.
found
Same
that
thing
like
with the
you can see the tree from the little plaza before Yahogul.
Oh, yeah, that's
The
right.
tree's
you
there,
can
but
see
the
where
garden
it-
isn't.
Yeah, the garden's not there. And
The
the
other
graves aren't
area
there.
that's not is the area where Gehrman goes to
Yes.
sleep.
Yeah, that's not there either. Oh, well,
Yeah.
there's land there, but there's a fence in the way.
There's a fence in
Is
the way.
there
Yeah,
land
you can't
there?
get there.
It's been
There's
a
a
while,
little bit.
but I
But there's like
It's not the
trees in the
same
way.
size.
seem to
but
recall
it's
there
like-
not
trees
being
in the
land
way.
there, but I could be wrong.
There's a little bit,
Yeah, okay.
but not the amount that he's there for.
And there's also like the altar in, and this is all like ground we've covered before, but the altar in the Hunter's Dream is covered in blood, but where we find the actual Court of the Eye is not, right?
Yeah,
Right.
So, which could just be the moon presence not exactly remembering it properly.
Or maybe there was a lot of blood there, and then it's been...
At the time the dream was conceived, yeah.
yeah.
But then you would think it would be dried up there, so I don't know.
Or scrubbed clean.
So we got the Old Hunter badge, which says, this hunter's badge crafted in Gehrman's time has no practical purpose, except perhaps to assist in romanticizing about the past. The badge was a special privilege for the hunters of the past and should not be dishonored. It should be left in peace unless one is truly prepared to assume the will of those gone before. And it's in the shape of
Burial
the
blade,
blade part of the burial
blade.
blade, right?
Also in the shape of the Orphan of Kos's weapon, but that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah. And one that...
That's a whole other conversation.
Well, is that something you want to talk about? Because we got time to talk about things.
So the Orphan of Kos has a bladed weapon, and it's covered in that placenta gunk. And so the question is, did Gehrman kill the orphan, scrub the pink goo off it, and put it on a stick? And that's where Siderite comes from.
Well, Siderite's supposed to have fallen from the heavens,
Right.
so it could be like
Yeah.
the way this nightmare's a stack, like it's fallen from.
Right, just like the snail falls.
Yeah. But it's further
poor-
confused
poor
because, like, Siderite's a
Scrooge.
real thing. It's just meteoric iron.
Yeah.
Presumably at this point, Yharnam, it's industrialized to the point where they wouldn't need meteoric iron, so. I don't know.
And also, something that we may not have mentioned previously is the fact that what's her name? Eileen's weapon is also made of Siderite.
Yes.
Right.
But so Gehrman's Hunter Cap, Hunter attire of Gehrman, the first Hunter, created before the workshop existed by making adjustments to everyday clothing, and later became the basis for all Hunter's garb. The Hunter's emphasis on engaging beasts with speed and therefore of selecting lightweight attire no doubt traces back to Gehrman's old combat style. And you could look at that in terms of like a meta commentary as well on Bloodborne and how it stands in stark contrast to the Souls games that
Yeah,
came prior to
Gehrman
it.
liked to stay under 30% equip load at all times.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he frowned upon dirty casuals who used the
Filthy
dark grain
casuals,
ring
yeah.
and the flipping Havel mages
Yeah,
and
exactly.
stuff like that.
Gehrman was a true hardcore soldier. No homing crystal soul mass for Gehrman. That shit is for scrubs.
And so this is something that I don't know if I've ever actually checked before, but I've never actually seen him out here with the workshop closed. And so he's not yet sleep talking. He's not yet talking about how he's shackled and Lawrence and Willem are taking so long, but he's just snoring. But I thought it was really interesting.
He can show up sometimes before the triggers for his dialogue, and he will just be snoring. I still don't know what causes it. I don't think there's any definitive answer on what exactly can cause it.
Same goes for the doll's prayer for the player.
Yeah. That one is probably just chance, but like actually what causes Gehrman's dialogue is still there's still different schools of thought on that. Like, some people are like, you have to kill Amelia, or some people are like, you have to do such and such.
And, like, we were talking about this another time, but it's like, his dialogue can get completely glitched out if you do certain things, yeah.
You can hear it from inside the...
No, but things like he'll get stuck saying certain things sometimes.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
Depending on what, like, how you treat the blood-starved beast and the hunter emblem.
Oh, wow.
So we're talking about, anyway.
Okay, so here's something that we talked about before we recorded, and that is the difference when, how the third umbilical cord, which gives you 3 insight, is different from the Madman's Knowledge, which gives you 1 insight, and so the stat insight, obviously, because the Cord of the Eye does something very different in terms of how it allows you to unlock the third ending. And then the Madman's Wisdom, which gives you 2 insight. But so what we're about to see is a sort of a side by side. But first, you'll note that when we actually just use, and I was very indecisive here about how I wanted to do it, but when you first use the third cord, or the Cord of the Eye, that it's just like Madman's Knowledge, except there's a heck of a lot of blood.
They overlay the cold blood thing on top of it.
Yeah.
So what Redgrave was just saying is that, it's almost as though they overlaid the Blood Echoes animation with that of the Madman's Knowledge. But you can actually see that the Cord of the Eye is on the left, and there's a whole lot of blood. That's 3 insight. Madman's Knowledge gives you 1 insight, and there's a little bit of blood. And the Great One's Wisdom on the right gives you 2 insight, and there's no blood at all.
Yeah, that's super weird. I never knew that.
Yep, never noticed that.
I didn't either until I actually decided I would do this.
I always assumed that Madman's Knowledge and Great One's Wisdom were the same animation.
But yeah, apparently they're not. Apparently there's a little bit of an extra particle effect, and
and so I increased the contrast here.
You can
so
see it better. You can see it a little bit better there. Yeah.
But with the Madman's Knowledge, I guess what that says to me is just basically because something we mentioned before we started recording was the Great One's Wisdom. The first one you find in the main game, so not in the Chalice dungeons, is when you first enter Bergenworth, right near the fluorescent flower, and right before you meet Master Willem, who again was very anti-blood.
Fear the old blood.
And so I don't really know what that means. But I did find that very, very interesting. But I guess it would seem to reflect, because this is something that we talked about in light of the DLC, is that prior to when the Paleblood Hunt was first written, we didn't have any other any information that would suggest the contrary. But that it was very plainly sort of blood versus eyes in terms of the chosen method of ascension.
Yeah, I think it still is for the most part, but there's a lot of stuff with the brain fluid and stuff like that.
And in the research hall, the rats with the glowing eyes and things like that. So they were clearly
I think that's just made
out.
to freak you out because they look like basilisks. I think that's what they're for.
Well,
God, petrification.
And so something that I pointed out in the episode when we first went to that's part of the research hall is that in real life, rats are by and large, the animal that is used most as a proxy for for humans in biological experiments.
Guinea pigs are better because they have more blood.
Well, none of them.
That's why guinea pigs are used, is because they have a lot of blood in them. That's cool.
Yeah, well, but none of them are actually proxies for human physiology. But that's kind of besides the point.
Pigs are.
But so I think that at least that particular set piece with the rats with the eyes and with the research hall quote unquote patients suggested at least to me that it wasn't necessarily so clear cut as they were just using old blood.
As I wrote it was, but I think there's still a significant divide.
But you also couldn't have known prior to.
I could have done better.
You could have, but no, And so tonight, Gehrman joins the hunt. So obviously we're talking over the boss fight this time because we did it last time, but I decided to use the...
You decided not to
Holy
fish for
Moonlight
parries like a scrub.
Well, I still did
Oh
that anyway.
no!
God.
Don't do it.
Well, it had been a long time since I had played Bloodborne.
Did you do
so I
it
was
versus
pretty rusty.
Maria? I hate
no.
that Maria
Well,
can be parried. It ruins that boss fight.
Ish. A little bit, but for the most part, I was just... I danced with her with the old Huntress Bow.
Have you seen Maria's visceral attack?
Where it looks
The
like she's kind
circle
of kissing
thing? It's
you.
very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. No, I've seen it. I've seen other people get it, but I've never had it triggered myself. No. And yeah, the Holy Moonlight Blade. Although I guess my character is overpowered in general
it's the
because I have
best
50
weapon
and
for an
everything.
overpowered character because it scales with everything so well. So
Yeah.
it's going to outdamage everything. By the way,
I'm doing closest.
best song in the Soul series.
The
First
Gehrman's
Hunter?
boss theme.
Yeah. I'm going to say it.
Well, there's a song in Dark Souls 3 that I think is probably better, but that's just me. It's obviously a very subjective thing.
Nah, it's subjective. This is the best.
So, I guess we probably should have talked about this before we only had 25 seconds left, but the fact that we popped the umbilical cords means that we'll somehow...
Don't worry, we're going to have a lot of time to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll be resistant to the moon presence's...
Make contact, Gehrman.
Advances.
His advances. I like the way you put that.
Well, it's kind of what
Alright,
it is.
see you guys at the credits.
Are you cold? Oh, good hunter.
So,
So,
childhood's beginning.
childhood's beginning.
Well, that makes perfect sense. I don't think we need to talk about that at all.
Yeah, so
No, that makes
why don't we
sense.
talk about
Fucking
that?
bizarre.
Why don't we
I'm
talk
kidding.
about that?
Okay.
So
where do we start?
we consumed,
Good
you know,
question.
the core of the eye. The item description says that, you know, to line one's brain with eyes is the key to ascension, basically. And again, as we pointed out earlier, that the naming convention of calling them third chords
Chord of the eye.
seems less to do with it being 1/3 of an umbilical cord, and everything to do with giving the player a hint that you need to use 3 of them in order to trigger the final boss, in conjunction with the note that we find in the lecture hall.
What I just want to bring up is some guy on Reddit, DX Imenes, I think is how you pronounce his name.
DX
DX Imenes. So the moon presence is a giant umbilical cord. If you look at the moon presence's head, it is a cross section of an umbilical cord. And when it is embracing you, it is smashing its face into your navel. It is affixing itself to you for something. Now, what does that mean? I don't know, but as soon as I heard that, I could never look at that cutscene the same way again. It's super uncomfortable now when you look at it.
Really creepy,
in that this giant eldritch umbilical cord is attaching itself to you. And when it successfully does that, it turns you into this sort of captive. What do you
In the
mean?
second ending, it does.
In the second ending, it successfully does whatever it's trying to do.
But in this ending, whatever, you know, adding to whatever immunity that the Paleblood Hunter has, which allowed the player character to, she or he, to resist that beast in the beginning, adding to that is the immunity that comes from consuming 3 chords of the eye. And then therefore allowing us seemingly to break the cycle. Is the only of the 3 endings. But then again, is it really breaking the cycle if, say, we just take the moon presence, the place of the moon presence?
Unfortunately, we won't know what happens, 2,000 years from now. Are we gonna grow into a new moon presence and just start the cycle over again? I don't know.
By the way, we're really off topic now, but have we still not found the gosh darn level 3 guidance room?
One of the developers said that the data exists, but it's not in the game.
Oh my gosh. It's like the pendant all over.
No, except
basically.
it straight up didn't exist.
Oh,
just
wow.
the Future
That's
Press guy being
amazing.
wrong.
Yeah.
But something to...
Someone found the pendant in Dark Souls 3.
Well, there's a...
It's like a dummied out item.
Right. Yeah, no, I saw that actually.
interesting.
There's a few dummied out items.
Yeah.
Interesting. But so, Redgrave in the Paleblood Hunt, at least the initial version, because I did read the initial version. I've not yet gotten around to reading your revised version.
Oh my god, you
but-
too? I was mad
Well,
enough when
it's-
JSF told me he hadn't read it. I thought, if
Well,
anything, you had
did
my
you-
back. Fuck off.
Well, I'm also someone who reads
It
for a
only
living
takes a
right
few
now,
hours
so...
to read. Well, okay,
Yeah,
what's your
and
question?
I spend like 8
What was
hours
your
a day
question?
reading. But, well, I was going to bring up that and ask for clarification if I'm remembering this wrong.
Actually, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. Mergo's lullaby in the background, if you listen very closely, you can hear something like moaning or breathing in the background. You have
sure
to
that's
listen.
not just me or JSF.
I'm 100% sure. I'm talking about like normally, like when you're listening to it. Just for people who want to go back and listen to it next time they fucking play the game.
I think it's Mergo sleeping, is it not?
It's like some kind of moan or something. Anyway, what were you saying?
About something you argued in at least the initial version. I think it was in the final version as well of the Paleblood Hunt, and that is that the player character seems to. I think it was partially on the basis of how Jura looks. Seems to be suffering from, was it sickle cell anemia? Anemia.
This was just a possibility I threw out,
like a speculation.
When I first played the game, my initial impression was that pale blood was my disease that I had come to Yharnam to get cured.
Yeah.
And that I wasn't looking for pale blood, but that I was a pale blood. And on further playthroughs, I obviously reversed that position, but that idea, I think, is still very interesting, that maybe there's some kind of specific disease that gives people an immunity to the Scourge, and that's what the Moon Presence or whatever is looking for.
Redgrave, you said you didn't pay attention to the pre-release stuff.
I didn't. I didn't actually. I didn't know that that we had supposedly come to Yharnam to find a cure for our disease until after I finished the game.
Yeah, that was something that was flagged up in the pre-release, but it's not really.
It's not in the game at all.
That we've supposedly come to Yharnam because we're suffering a disease.
Right.
Which, makes perfect sense that there's something unique about the Paleblood Hunter.
There's definitely something unique about the Paleblood Hunter in a way that hasn't been unique about any Souls protagonist before. The Slayers of Demon is not unique at all. The Chosen Undead is not unique at all. The Next Monarch is not unique at all. Even the Unkindled Champion of Ash is not unique at all. But the Paleblood Hunter, there's something weirdly unique about him or her that doesn't apply to other hunters, except for Jura and Eileen that we know of.
And that you argued in, again, at least in the initial version of the Paleblood Hunt, that not only does that allow us to resist whatever the Scourge of the Beast is, but that also allows us to become an agent for the Moon Presence, who seems to be hunting or wanting to kill
specifically
other
that the Moon Presence is looking for, and the reason we're chosen by the Moon Presence is because we have this special thing to us. Not that it's like two unrelated things. I think the fact that we're special and that in that opening cinematic we symbolically resist the Scourge of the Beast, I think that's...
Well, I didn't mean to suggest that those two things were different, but also that it's just really interesting that also winds up in the third ending sort of being the cause of the Moon Presence's demise. That, together with the 3/3 chords, it allows us to kind of assume, presumably, the position of the Moon Presence.
I don't know if we assume the position of the Moon Presence. I don't know if this is like the dawn of a new age for humanity or anything like that. It's impossible to say. Impossible to say what happens next in Bloodborne's universe.
Yeah.
Because, I was talking to Aegon, I think it was after the Canehurst one, about the name Childhood's Beginning. Because there's an Arthur C. Clarke novel called Childhood's End that is about humanity evolving to the next, level. Under the guidance of what's basically the Great Ones.
I think that was part of the 3 hours
the trophy description, and the trophy descriptions are all very iffy, but the trophy description for Childhood's Beginning does say you're, ushering in a new age for humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And so I guess just on this point, to kind of drive home the point that we just made a couple of minutes ago, something else that you pointed out, and I think it's a really apt point that bears repeating, is that just because there are two, if you have two great ones, just because they're both great ones, doesn't mean that they both share the same interests.
No, great one is a label made.
They're not on the same team. Yeah, and it's not like a label for affection.
Right. Great one is a word that humans came up with because we couldn't describe them any other way. But they don't have to be of the same species, the same ideology, the same religion, the same race, the same team. They can all be completely unique things. The only thing they all share, the only thing they all have in common, is that they're greater than we are. They're on a higher level of existence than we are.
And so during the Moon Presence boss fight as well, JSF, something that we were discussing was that a number of people have pointed out that notwithstanding the whole Moon Presence being a cross section of an umbilical cord thing, but that the moon presence, its midsection looks almost like that of a silver beast. And this is something that you addressed in your Bloodborne up close video on the Hunter's Dream. But did you want to speak to that?
Well, one of the things I talked was actually, I think it was the appendix, not the Hunter's Dream.
Oh yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, but like the thing is, every beast enemy in the game, things like Dark Beast Piles, Silver Beasts, Cleric Beasts, etc. The word beast is kemono, which this is Japanese, just means like animal beast thing. The moon presence when you fight it is specifically the word used is mamono, which means like a creature that is like beyond the normal. Beyond, like, it's a strange,
like
otherworldly, yeah. It's like, it can be translated into things like demon and stuff. But the moon presence is very clearly defined as something that is different from a regular beast.
And, so in terms of
also, it's the only thing in the game that is called that.
Oh, very interesting.
Oh, is it really?
So none of the other great ones.
The other great ones are just called like superior being or something like that.
Oh, that's interesting. Actually,
the moon presence is a superior being, but it's when you fight it, it's like the moon demon. Or
because it's
like
nameless.
Very interesting.
Is what it is, whereas the other ones all have
it's nameless. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Well, it's possibly called Paleblood, depending on how you take Miyazaki's interview.
Yeah.
And we do seek it to transcend the hunt.
It's also called Flora if you like jumping to guns or jumping guns.
And so that's a really good point that bears repeating as well, is that that the seek Paleblood to transcend the hunt. And so the only of the three endings, the only one that you can actually describe as transcending the hunt is the third ending.
Yep.
Because again, like, we don't know what happens because the developers had to decide on a starting point and an ending point. But so we don't know what happens after the arbitrary. Well, I guess not really. Well, it's arbitrary, but with good reason. The ending point of the story. The childhood's or humanity's beginning, whatever it's called, or whatever the third ending is called. Yeah, it's the only one that you can actually describe as transcending the hunt. So in that sense, it would make sense that, like Miyazaki's suggestion in the official guide, that is one of the potential meanings of the term Paleblood.
And there's that note in the lecture hall that just says
the pale-blooded
moon presence beckoned by Lawrence, Paleblood. Yeah.
Beckoned by Lawrence and his associates, Paleblood.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's really tough sometimes to kind of navigate the. And I'm surprised this is something that you and Redgrave haven't thought about at all this episode, but of the utility and the necessity of looking to the original Japanese text to kind of clear out that there's.
You mean the original English text?
Well, Redgrave's stance is basically he played the game in English, and that's fair enough.
And that's fair, especially in the context of a game that, its creator, whose native language is Japanese, but regardless of that...
he speaks English.
But he speaks English, and he purposely, he says in that same interview that he's purposely designed the game to allow the players the room, and of the Souls games in general, to allow the players space for interpretation. And that, there were certain questions he refused to answer. And this is something we've talked about time and again in the series. But that, there's certain questions in the interview that he refused to answer simply because he wanted to leave that interpretive space open for players to play with. And that's
the worst part of the interview was when he says he considered making Paleblood easier to understand, but then decided not to.
Yeah.
Yep.
My favorite was how he discussed that he does cycles himself. He was like, it's weird because with Armored Core, I made something that was really easy to follow, and then I made Demon Souls, which is impossible to follow, and then I made Dark Souls, which was kind of straightforward, or, it was easier to follow than Demon Souls was, and then I made Bloodborne, which is impossible to follow.
So one thing I did want to point out, though, was earlier, Redgrave, you mentioned about Iosefka, and I'd be remiss, just because of his recent contributions to the series, if I didn't mention that in a previous episode we talked about Desolate Penguin wrote like a 5 or 6 page, and Desolate Penguin, who's a lawyer by trade, wrote like a 5 or 6 page defense of Iosefka. And as in the episode where we discussed that, I'm not going to recapitulate the entire thing, but one of several really good points he raised is, and I was just thinking about it after what you said earlier, but we didn't have time to. I didn't have time to raise it then. Is it would be really, really bad storytelling, and yes, granted, the Iosefka storyline seems to have been cut halfway, but it would be really bad storytelling if normal Iosefka was basically the same as Impostor Iosefka. If they were both villains, like, what is the point of the switch, you know?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. My counter to that would be, I totally agree. It is bad storytelling, and what it should have been is it should have been Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the same person.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
that's my counter argument.
Yeah.
Is I agree with you. It is bad storytelling.
Yeah,
Here's
I've had the
what I would
Jekyll
have
and
done
Hyde
better.
comparison brought up in my comments as well.
And it would have been way better.
And it fits the
you talked
Victorian aesthetic of what's happening.
And you mentioned that it was towards the end of your appendix video, I think, JSF, where you said...
I don't remember my own videos.
I rewatched them the other
this.
day so that I would be prepared for today. But one of the...
But you didn't read the Paleblood Hunt.
You didn't watch the episode where we talked
I didn't.
at length.
I haven't watched like any of your videos except for the ones I'm in.
Mister, your videos are 3 hours, so they're too long. I can't watch them. And you're saying it only takes 3 hours to read the Paleblood Hunt. So, But yeah, no, so JSF, what you said was basically, yeah, hopefully in a future game, maybe they'll return to the whole Jekyll and Hyde idea, especially if
yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, because that would have been a very interesting way for that storyline to go. But
although if they were going to do, like, original Iosefka was bad as well, it should have been that original Iosefka and then the replacement, but then it turns out original Iosefka is actually worse than the replacement.
Yeah.
That would have been an
if
interesting.
it turned out that the replacement was
it's nicer.
actually a good person, and like the original was the villain, that would be a cool option. I think, I think it's kind of messy.
Just in general, I would suggest to you, Redgrave, to just if you're interested in challenging your view on Iosefka, I would highly recommend checking out Dezo Penguin's defense of Iosefka.
I don't know if I have the energy to continue writing out long defenses, but I'll definitely read it at least. I think he deserves that much.
And that's why I mentioned, just because he's made a lot of really substantial contributions to the series.
I'll definitely look it up afterwards.
Well, I'll send you the link.
I don't know if I have the energy to write a response.
And then... yeah, I think that's about it. So we took a break, and I was thinking about, sort of the loose ends and the things that we didn't really clarify today. And, I was starting to make a list of the various things that we could talk about. But equally, I think part of the thesis, if you will, of this entire playthrough has been that there are really no definitive answers. And that... part of what we've tried to do here is sort of lay out the possibilities, the conditions of possibility for the storyline of the game, and of probing sort of the relationship between the gameplay mechanics and the lore of the game. And insofar as that was the primary goal of the series, and I guess all of you viewers will be the judge of that, but I think it was pretty successful, and that isn't to say that it was my success. Something I mentioned during our break a few minutes ago was that, this whole series started on the basis of Redgrave's The Paleblood Hunt, and then, later with JSF's comments and contributions, and then his videos as well, and everyone else who wrote comments throughout the series and shared their insights and things that I could never have come to on my own. And so Marcus... a couple weeks ago had, his Poison Arrow podcast, his most recent episode, where he talked about sort of the I believe it was called Souls is Dead or something to that effect, where he argued, and not incorrectly, that there will never be, you can never recapture, and perhaps that's just nostalgia in general, but you can never recapture the experience of playing Demon's Souls after it first came out, because it was such a, it wasn't a huge thing back then.
Yeah.
I would 100% agree with that.
But equally, he went on to argue that that you could never discover these things anymore, that there's always going to be strategy guides and things before, and he acknowledged the fact that he has worked on strategy guides himself, and so there's an obvious tension there. But equally, I think that this playthrough is a testament to a counterpoint to that argument, that we discovered a whole lot of things. And it wasn't because any of us were brilliant or that we spent more time playing the game than other people or we had more insight. It was just that...
I am, and I did, and I do.
It was that we all kind of, came together with our perspectives. And we shared and we critiqued and we mostly it was me congratulating people saying, wow, you guys are so smart. But yeah, I just, wanted to give my thanks to all the viewers and to Redgrave and JSF because, were it not for all of you, this playthrough would be basically my Dark Souls 2 Let's Talk Lore playthrough, which is just me talking to myself for 20 hours. And it wasn't nearly as interesting nor as engaging for me, and I imagine for the audience as well. So,
just like Dark Souls 2.
Well, Dark Souls...
I'm kidding.
Be nice. Dark Souls 2.
I'm joking. I love that.
Especially
game.
in spite, and that's why I was pleased because I had no idea.
It's just super easy to make fun of. It's just a big target.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. And so at this point in the episode, we are gonna say some proper goodbyes in 10 or 15 minutes or something. But at this point in the episode, you might want to click off, or I will put something on the screen which will allow you to skip past our forthcoming preliminary discussion of Dark Souls 3. And so a lot of this is just, it's going to be completely just unformed and free-form discussion of the game, its mechanics, the lore, really nothing groundbreaking, but this is the first time the three of us have been on a Skype call together to actually talk about this. And since it will be some time until I'm actually able to have the time to start working on Dark Souls 3 Let's Talk Lore, because I have my comprehensive exams coming up in July. So, notwithstanding a live stream or two, which I might do in the interim, it's very unlikely that you'll see any lore content from me related to Dark Souls 3 until at least the middle of July. So, if you are one of those people who is still playing Dark Souls 3, or if you're not interested, and if you don't want spoilers, I'll put something on the screen now which will allow you to skip to a point in this episode where we say goodbye or talk about anything relating to Bloodborne that we might have forgotten up to this point. But yeah, so if you are among those people, thank you very, very, very much for joining us. Yeah, we'll see you later. So Dark Souls 3 spoilers in 3, 2, 1... Soul of Cinder, I think, is the coolest boss in any of the Souls games.
Definitely.
You know what's great? Technically, Solaire is the final boss.
Yep.
Well, but so was everyone else, right?
So all the previous lords.
Well, not everyone.
Not everyone, yeah.
When you played Dark Souls 1, did you link the fire or did you let it go?
First time I let it go. Second time.
When you consider your canonical, this is what I would do in this situation.
Right.
Because if you linked the fire, then your character is part of the Soul of Cinder.
As Aegon of Astora, I linked the fire.
Okay.
Then Aegon of Astora is part of the Soul of Cinder.
And so the unkindled ash, the unkindled one, is said to be individual, collective, sort of a mixture of the two, of people who failed to link the fire. So failed to link the fire, does that mean that they purposely walked away from the first flame? Or does that mean that they just sort of went hollow and never wound up getting anywhere near the first flame?
I think it's the latter, surely.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm. So, and so that was one of those things.
Like, isn't the whole thing that we're unkindled ash that's risen because there's no chosen undead left to bother trying to link the fire?
Because they've all... Yeah, well, and there was a...
The world is so fucked that we're the only ones
that
left.
We've actually run out of undead.
There is, but there is apparently a... so all the undead are hollow, basically, capital H hollow.
Yeah.
But so NSK, who has a YouTube channel, but is making a series of videos just as for your information, very kindly decided to start doing that for me and for some of his other friends. In one of these videos he made, which I'll link in the video description with his permission, because I'm not sure if he actually wants people... The description of the video says, "This is not the Dark Souls video you're looking for," or something to that effect. But he said that he read an interview somewhere and he couldn't find the link, so I don't know, how valid this is.
This sounds fishy.
That Miyazaki said something to the effect of the unkindled ash, even though it's an individual person, that they are also drawing on the strength of all of the other unkindled, like not the unkindled
The thing
ones,
is that we
but...
choose a class and we choose a burial gift that specifies that is specifically us.
Yes.
Like
and,
we were a herald who passed out and we were buried with, a fire gem or something.
But...
Right.
By the way, the burial, all of those were disappointing, right? Am I crazy?
Yeah,
or
there was...
looking at these like, I don't want any of these.
In general, Dark Souls 3, it's streamlined a little. So the weirder, crazier stuff that... Okay, it was kind of annoying when they included it, but it gave the game a lot of texture. Here it's not
key?
really... yeah, the master key, just things like...
Yeah, the master key.
Yeah, we're going really, kind of off topic, but, the way that...
We're already off topic. This is a Bloodborne video.
We're talking about Dark Souls 3 in a Bloodborne video.
Okay, Leonhard, however you say
Leonhard,
it.
yeah.
He just shows up and he's like, hey, you want a red eye orb? Here's how to do it. And he gives you a 3-step quest.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a lot more, friendly, it's a lot more intuitive, and it's a lot more, it's if you want to get right into PvP, that's how you do it. No complaints.
It's way easier than finding Koth.
Exactly.
But
the way that, they gated off significant content that was significant to the game, it was significant to the lore. It's gated off behind what's basically a sequence break that most people would never think of doing. That made the game, it gave it this really interesting, texture that they bothered including stuff like that.
Who would imagine doing the Four Kings before placing the
Exactly.
Unless you knew that
It's the sort of thing that you... Because, I do sequence breaks in games a lot. And it's just well, I'm bored today, I might do it this way, just because I feel like it. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of
That's why I think Demon Souls is the strongest of
Exactly.
Because
Demon Souls is still my favorite.
You can go to the Shrine of Storms and just beat up the skeletons with your fists and stuff, right?
Yep.
I guess really the only sequence break you can do in this game is fighting the dancer early, and that is...
yeah.
I don't know how.
And even if you do that, you can bleed her out. The Grand Archives.
Yeah, because Gotthard's corpse won't spawn.
Because Gotthard's corpse doesn't show up until you kill all the...
So you can only go to the untended graves, then?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
You can do it Cyros.
So that's why Gotthard's corpse is there, because it was one of those things that, going all the way back to my favorite game from my childhood, Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap. So you've played that, right, JSF?
Yes, I have.
The first dungeon, and actually through several parts of the game, where there will be an enemy right next to the door with the key in it.
Yeah.
And you kill the enemy, you get the key, you open the door. Why not just open the door?
Because it's an action game.
Yeah. Well, and so for back then, it kind of makes sense. But, that was my first reaction when I saw the corpse there with the key on it. And I was,
very Crown of Illusions.
Yeah. Yeah. But, we know now that you actually have to do something to make the corpse spawn. So it's not as ridiculous in retrospect.
It's not as bad as the Crown of Illusions.
Yeah. And also in terms of the texture comment that you were making, JSF.
Yeah.
And I guess this relates back to, what EMB was saying in that Poison Arrow podcast, and that is, after a couple of weeks, everyone is aware of what you need to do to get a full eye orb, though, no? So,
exactly.
Doesn't that kind of...
I mean, I remember with Dark Souls 1, 3 months later, people were still trying to find out how to save Civ.
I didn't...
You know what I mean?
I didn't start playing Dark Souls 1 until... What was it? 2013, July 2013, something like that. So 2 years late, pretty much.
I was even later than that.
It was Rurikon. I wanted, because he had all of these Dark Souls for Dummies videos, and so I it was all watching videos online, and none of it was blind. But that's how I figured out kind of how the game worked and stuff, was just watching YouTube videos. But with Dark Souls 3, it's certainly... Because now there's literally an entire industry that has sprung up around these games, right?
Yeah.
There not only is there an industry around these games, it's an industry complete of just people completely independent from the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just like people following... I was gonna say like leeching, but that's a bad connotation.
Yeah,
Exactly.
But it's just like there's like a whole industry of people who just follow around FromSoft and talk about their games for a living,
which
is super weird when you think about it. Like,
well, like, you know, all the more power to. Like, I do
But
that,
also,
but it's
you
a
think about it,
hobby.
it's
no,
people-
It's a hobby.
I'm not saying it's
no,
bad.
I know you're not.
I'm
I
just
know
saying
you're not.
it's weird when you think about when you take a step back and you look at that there's this entire industry revolving around talking about From Software's
And
games.
especially when you
It's
consider
very
how relatively obscure FromSoft used to be
And
as
it's
a
not
developer.
even From Software's games; it's the Souls games, of which
Specifically,
there are
yeah.
like
Yeah,
4
no,
and a
you're right,
half.
because they're not talking about Armored Core. They're
Yeah,
not
exactly.
talking about Metal Wolf Chaos.
I have
and
a
they
friend
should
Which
who
I know,
knows
yeah.
Armored Core
Chaos.
lore, and he's really annoyed that there's no market for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
I would watch Armored Core lore.
And
I want to learn all about the Raven.
And like I don't know how to feel about the whole like the rise of, because like, and I've said this in a few videos before, but I see Souls, you know, I some people use the whole Soulsborne label, but I think that's kind of silly. So
They're just Souls.
I
games.
look
Bloodborne
at
is just a Souls game.
Souls as being at once a genre but also a series. So, and I would
Yeah.
include. And Bloodborne kind of straddles that line.
Well,
It's,
Bloodborne was going to be Beast Souls to begin with, anyway.
yeah, which I think would have.
No, it wasn't. It was going to be Demon Souls too. you,
Mbasa.
I'm not joking.
Mbasa. Well, no, I think that was just fan service. No.
I
It does
think there's
feel
some
more like Demon
significant
Souls than Dark
evidence.
Souls.
I think there's some significant evidence that it at one point the possibility of it being Demon
And that you
Souls.
I
could
would
look
agree
at
with that,
look
yeah.
at it as the world after one of the endings where there's no more magic.
well, because
Magic
right,
is-
if you kill the
they-
old one,
if you kill the old one, magic is erased.
who
from
is the
world.
source of both sorcery and or like the soul
Miracles.
arts? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I've never actually
Yeah,
played the game.
Sorcery and
It is
Miracles,
the
they're the same. They
Same source, even though they were opposed to each other.
although
throughout
they
the game.
don't know it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
that's
they
the
don't.
reveal at the
Which
end,
is
that they
amazing.
realize that they've both been worshipping the same thing.
That is such a cool twist.
It's a bit more complicated than
Yeah,
that.
well,
but
a bit more,
basically.
yeah.
Well, until I
Because
can actually
whether,
play it. Yeah.
whether or not the old one is the god of the church or it is the Yggdrasil source of soul arts is a whole other conversation.
But either way, there is, you know,
right,
there
the
is a way you
reveal
could.
of the Talisman of Beasts.
Yeah.
In fact, the reveal of the Talisman of the Beasts, I would say, because it's what people lost their shit over so much and it was so huge, I'd say that was the whole inspiration for putting lore in item descriptions. Because it's not really there in Demon Souls.
Demon Souls is it's
more
a lot more
environmental,
environmental,
right? Yeah.
like I was saying before.
Demon Souls is 100% environmental and with
I'd say
with
it's
some lore here or
it's
there.
like 95% environmental.
Wow.
Yeah,
Really.
and then
You get
the
cues from the
Talisman of-
items, and then you link them to the environment.
But it's more flavor text than explicit lore.
No,
is
it's
what
like
you're saying?
it's like finding like a ring, like that. There's a bit where like you find
Stockpile Thomas is.
or you find Lord Riddell's
things like
ring
that.
in the Tower of Latria, and
Yeah.
then you can connect that with
Yeah.
where he
I have no
was.
idea what
But,
footage
like,
I'm
the-
going to overlay on top of this because I don't have Demon
But
Souls.
Just put more Sonic the
But the
Hedgehog.
point is that when you pick up the Talisman of the Beasts and you get that revelation, it's this huge moment, and it's the only item in Demon Souls that has like a huge
Yeah.
bit of lore to it
Yeah.
like that I would go so far as to
So
say
in meta
that's
terms,
the,
that's
that's the inspiration of
Interesting.
putting lore in
Because
item
the
descriptions. Because when you get, like,
descriptions
the
just
soul-
tended to be like, this belongs to this person.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
you get like the soul of the flame lurker, it's like this is a soul of a flame lurker. But then when you like look at like the big G and like the two god hands that can be found in front of the
Big
flame
M.
lurker, and that the flame lurker is positioned in front of the old dragon god, and that the big G was the slayer of dragons, and that Ed needs the soul of the flame lurker, you can say that the flame lurker is possibly the father of Ed and the blacksmith. So you can make this kind of narrative to that, which is not in any of the item descriptions, and is 100% just people speculating.
And
think-
like, if anyone's watched Matthew Matosis's Demon Souls commentary, he does a similar thing where he points out there's a little self-contained story about an assassin who tries to kill the fool's idol, and it's all self-contained just through where things are placed.
And so
Yeah.
what I've found most satisfying, I think, about Dark Souls 3 is, and I do want to talk about, so just I was thinking about this based on the Demon Souls talk.
We said 15 minutes, and it's going to be like 3 hours.
No, because I got to go to bed soon, but and JSF probably has to have lunch at some point. Saturday morning cartoons, or I guess it would be Saturday afternoon.
It's 2 p.m.
Damn it.
So morning.
But so I do want to talk about the Storm Ruler. But before we get to that, is
talk about something that I was so super hyped about, and then 5 minutes later I was like, but why?
Yeah, well,
I was very disappointed.
We'll get to that, but in
general.
in a broader sense, that I think that Dark Souls 3 represents in a lot of ways the FromSoft's. You could see with Dark Souls 2 what they were trying to do with Majula. They were trying to mix Firelink with the Nexus. Or at least that's how it seemed to me.
Yeah.
That it was supposed to be... Because the areas weren't initially supposed to be connected, right? They were supposed to be discrete areas that you would warp to. But then...
You mean in Demon Souls? Or do you mean in...
No, in Dark Souls 2.
The beginning of Dark Souls 2.
Dark Souls 2.
Yeah, there's like leftover map data for something that looks exactly like the Nexus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, the result... And that's I think, a big part of the reason why most people... I think somewhat unfairly dismiss Dark Souls 2 is because of its troubled development past. But as we've talked about on several occasions on this show and elsewhere, that we think that Tanimura did an amazing job considering.
Yeah, Tanimura is a hero.
God, he did. He is a hero to the masses for self.
Which is why I was very, very happy to see that he was co-director for Dark Souls 3.
Oh and my God. God bless him.
I think in so many ways Dark Souls 3 represents the realization of a vision that they tried but utterly failed for reasons that were understandable but unfortunate in Dark Souls 2.
Dark Souls 3 is a sequel to Dark Souls 1.
Yeah.
Whereas Dark Souls 2 felt like something very weird.
Dark Souls 3 is also a sequel to Dark Souls 2, though. Whether or not really. you think so.
But, like, here's the thing. It's like, in Dark Souls 2, everybody was kind of turned off by all the constant references to Dark Souls 1. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because, like, in Dark Souls 2, they were trying to have their cake and eat it, too. And most of it does come from the development cycle, which is, like, they wanted to have their own whole new story with Vendrick and the Giants and the Shards of Manus. But at the same time, they kept coming back to Dark Souls 1. Yeah. And it came off kind of weird.
They can't decide if it's a direct sequel or not.
Whereas Dark Souls 3 is just straight up, this is a direct sequel to Dark Souls 1.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just straight up.
It's a direct sequel with bits and pieces of Dark Souls 2, kind of like the Profaned Capital and, yeah.
I'm really hoping the DLC brings back all of
just in a broad sense. In a broad sense, the the reason why I'm not able to really articulate this in a specific way is just that there's so many little things. So, like Firelink, for example, how it really is just the Nexus. But then you look at the level design. The level design in the early areas in particular, I felt much more closely invokes Dark Souls 2.
Definitely.
Than it does Dark Souls 1.
Well, like, we were talking about this, and I don't know if it's going to end up in the final cut, so we'll reiterate.
Okay.
But basically, everything between Undead Settlement and, we'll say, Profaned Capital, that kind of half of the game feels like a completely different game to the stuff that happens in Lothric and Archdragon Peak.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like there's two games. It feels like there's one game which is literally everything up to Aldrich, including Yharnam. And then including Aldrich and everything after Aldrich is a completely different game, and the second game is way better than
I'd say that the second game starts in Cemetery of Ash, goes through to Vort, then picks up again once you beat the Dancer.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I break it down.
I don't know if because I'm just thinking back to my playthrough and
it's just like, look at the difference of the level design between like Farron Keep, which is just so large and wide, and you just run and like the forest is
super
and just the way that you fight through a swamp and then it leads to another swamp.
Yeah.
And when you look at Undead Settlement is so big.
It's enormous. Yeah.
It's so
I found like 5% of my first time through.
That I think it suffers from it.
Definitely.
I think it's too big.
It's overwhelming, yeah.
It's way too big. It's like you came up with this huge map. It's like all of Yharnam in one area.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but there's very little there. You just run through it.
Yeah.
Well, but there's a lot of little things, right?
There's a
Yeah.
lot of little things, yeah, but it feels like, and when you compare that to the level design of like Archdragon Peak,
Yeah,
or you
super
compare that to the
condensed.
level design of the Grand Archives, which is super dense and super cool. Everything about the Grand Archives is awesome except for the Crystal Sage. That's the only thing that's not awesome about the Grand Archives.
I would suggest,
Fuck
so
that
on,
guy.
on the subject of level design, I think this is someone that I started watching because of JSF's recommendation, but Super Bunny Hop recently did like a 40-minute video.
Yeah, I know his stuff.
Oh, okay.
He has really cool
So I'll
stuff.
put a link to that in the description because, like, some of his soul stuff I feel like misses the point entirely.
Yeah, me
but
too.
this was, and yeah, like I get really frustrated with it. But this was a really good and really on point video about I believe it's called the evolution of level design in the Dark Souls series. And yeah, like I think he did justice to the level design while pointing out its flaws in Dark Souls 2. But also pointed out just, I guess, yeah, a better way of articulating this point that I've been trying to make but failing to actually articulate, about how Dark Souls 3 represents in a lot of ways, like there are some areas where they just still haven't learned. So like the Covenant system is one example, but
Oh my god, the Covenant, it's the
so
worst
bad.
it's ever been.
but for
It's
the
the
most
worst.
part,
It's
in a
worse than Dark Souls 1.
in a broad sense, that they have like credit where it's due. FromSoft has learned from a lot of its mistakes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
From
Except for
past,
the Covenants.
except for the Covenants, apparently. But in theory, I really do like the fact that they got rid of the armor upgrades, because it makes it easier to implement something like the weapon upgrade matchmaking. But in practice, like I said off camera, that I created a build specifically for Blade of the Dark Winds, and I haven't gotten a single summon yet. And
Well, that's just it being broken.
I've waited for like
Yeah.
4. Like, why is there no blue eye orb? I don't why.
I really don't.
Or
get
just
that,
make it
but,
like the other Covenants, where if you invade with a red eye orb, you
Yeah,
invade
I
as a
really
blue
don't get
spirit,
that.
right? Like,
the thing is, like, Dark Souls 3, I really liked it, but I'm glad that it appears to be the last Souls game, because
Definitely.
it really does feel like they've taken this formula to its limit.
I don't think it'll be the last Souls game. I
It'll
think
be the last for a
they'll
while.
take it somewhere different. It'll be the last. It might be the last
You
Dark
think there's going
Souls
to be like
game.
a sci-fi Souls game?
I
or
hope so.
something?
That's what I'm hoping for.
Well, that's what
Armored Core
from
Souls style?
yeah, I'd play that.
Armored Core Souls,
Armored Souls.
Armored Souls. I would play that, where you
I
can
would
make
play
it like
Armored
Souls.
Fallout 4 is like the power armor, but like make it Dark Souls basically. I would, and see, that's the thing, because it's an interesting problem for FromSoft, that with Miyazaki as a president, he's basically Souls, right? Like he's
Yes,
the
he
person.
is.
When you think
He
of
is Souls.
Dark Souls or Demon Souls, you think of Miyazaki,
When you think of Souls, you think of Hidetaka Miyazaki.
Yeah,
and so now he's the president, and so
And he doesn't want to do it anymore.
he
Is the
doesn't
thing.
want to do what Dark Souls games.
Souls.
He doesn't
done
want to
with
do
it.
Souls.
Yeah, but but he's
What
also.
he said was... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, but he's the president, but he's From Software is now a subsidiary of a much larger and much more presumably capitalistic company than is FromSoft, but I don't really know all that much about them.
Also, they're
From
still under
Software.
contract with Sony, aren't they, to make like some more Sony exclusive stuff?
Really?
I think so.
They might be. They are the parent of the Kadokawa.
Yeah, it's like a company that does manga and anime.
Yeah,
and
it's like
stuff.
an entertainment
Oh,
company rather
yeah.
than a
Yeah,
software
okay,
company.
yeah, sure.
but they're a humongous company.
Yeah.
So I remember there being a lot of concern when they were first purchased by them, because it was like, oh shit, like what's gonna happen? But yeah, so it'll be because Miyazaki's the president, and even if he doesn't want to do Souls anymore, I guess that there is, there can perhaps be reason to be concerned that.
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, before Dark Souls, even after Demon Souls, before Dark Souls, From Software was a little fish in a big pond.
Yeah.
But if whatever game FromSoft wants to put out now, people will buy it.
But there's still like, and this is something that we have to be mindful of, is the extent to which we're embedded in this community. Could give us an idea, or could give us false illusions as to how big the community actually is, and how much of a market there is for these games out there. And so I'm looking at VG charts with a Z. I don't know how accurate. I presume that it's not accurate at all.
It sounds very reputable.
Well, I've been looking at this since back in the day when I was an Xbox fanboy. I'd be like, oh yeah, they're beating the PlayStation this week. That's something that actually matters.
Oh, God, really?
But we were all young once, okay? I turned 30 last week, so I'm now an adult.
Bitter, narcissistic, and in my mid-20s.
So in the US, according to this website, so Dark Souls 3 has been out for 4, but I guess that's only the PS4 version. But how many copies do you think the PS4 version has sold?
I have no idea.
I have no idea.
So
it actually doesn't seem to be that many based on the trophies I'm seeing.
417,000. But that's just the PS4 version.
That's around what I would think.
Just according to this website, which has a history, I don't remember where I read this, but it has a history of just basically fudging numbers and going more with sales projections than actual sales.
Theoretically, multiply that by 3, you've got
but
1.2.
the PS4 is by far the largest of the Souls communities.
by
far,
it's the most popular console.
So Xbox One, 150,000. So and then the PC one, I don't even see it here on the list. Let me search. Because I am interested to see how many sold for the PC.
I would be surprised if it sold under 1 million.
And so 1 million, as I understand it in the industry, or at least it was 3 or 4 years when I actually paid attention to this stuff. 1 million is the mark of a successful game, but that's not a huge market.
Is.
So
it still is.
The PC version isn't even on the top 100. So I would assume that the PC probably 50 to 100,000, based on the 150,000 for.
Yeah, I'm genuinely surprised by that number. That's lower than I would think.
So I guess let's see Dark Souls, or let's see Bloodborne. That would actually be, but see, Bloodborne was also a special case because there were a lot of people like myself who bought a PS4 exclusively for Bloodborne.
Yeah, I did that.
Bloodborne was the console buyer. It was the game that was
it was the killer app.
Okay. Yeah, it was like, okay, this is the game coming out, I'm gonna buy a PS4. It's just like Metal Gear Solid 4 was for the PS3.
And so I should also point out those numbers I was looking at were just North America. But so for Bloodborne...
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, so they definitely...
So they're definitely larger, definitely over 1 million. So for Bloodborne, according to the site...
Because I was stunned, yeah.
Global sales for Bloodborne, 2.17 million, which is pretty good.
That's pretty good.
But that's not...
That's a grade A title.
That's not the really big AAA titles each year,
it's not 8 or 9 million. Or anything.
Yeah,
I don't know. I say you're cracking champagne over 2.1 million.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say just because of how much So the point I'm trying to make with all this is that development costs are going up and up and up. Sure. And so for a company like FromSoft to go in a completely different direction without using the engine that they entered into this agreement with Sony to get, it might not make sense for them to do anything other than Souls, because they have the engine, they have the fan base. I'm not saying this is good or bad or anything like that, but I don't see them going away from this formula.
I'll tell you one thing. If Dark Souls 4 comes out in 2 years, I'll buy it. If Dark Souls 5 comes out 2 years after that, probably won't buy it.
Yeah, and see, that's the other thing about Dark Souls 3 that really amazes me, and with Bloodborne as well, is the fact that we've gotten, 3 Souls games in 3 years?
You know what, did you play any of the Assassin's Creed games?
I downloaded one of them because it was free, but I got bored after 5 minutes.
I played Assassin's Creed 1, I was like, fuck yeah, I'm into this. I played Assassin's Creed 2, it came out 2 years later. I was like, fuck yeah, I'm into this. I played Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, came out the next year. I was like, yeah, this is really great. And then I played Revelations, and I was like, yeah. And then I played Black Flag, and I was like, yeah. And then another one came out next year, and I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I can't keep playing this. I'm tired.
But I've
who else is having that problem is Telltale.
Oh,
Telltale's having the exact same problem. It's like,
It also doesn't help that all their games are buggy fucking messes.
Well, that's... Yeah.
And that, the Game of Thrones one they released, that's the only Telltale game I've ever bought. And, your decisions mean absolutely nothing. It's pointless.
Yeah.
And I as I understand it, that wasn't necessarily the case in The Walking Dead, but...
It's actually... the big secret of Telltale is never play it a second time.
Yeah, wow.
Because it will destroy the mystery for you.
Yep.
That any of your... It'll shatter the illusion that any of your decisions actually matter.
Also, I bought it on the 360 before I had a PS4, and like the whole thing, like it would just freeze and run at like 15. It was a mess. Yeah, never again. Never buy a Telltale game again. But yeah, I don't know. It's all of this, and we've gotten completely away from talking about Dark Souls 3 itself.
We could talk about how many Armored Core games there are if you want, like, a comparison.
How many Armored Core games were there? There's 6?
I have lost count.
Souls
No, there's way more than 6.
Because there's subtitled ones too, right?
Yeah, they were released numbered ones, and then the numbered ones will get subtitled, like, kind of side calls.
Yeah,
it's
like,
in the...
There's Armored Core, and then there's like Armored Core Last Raven.
Yeah,
and there was Halo 3
and then
ODS.
And then there's some that aren't even in the series or subtitle. It's just like, hey, here's a random Armored Core game. Have fun.
Yeah.
And so, like, when people are like, oh, from reusing stuff, I'm like, have you seen Armored Core?
Yeah.
Like, they will just...
There's like 20 Armored Core games.
The thing is, they will literally just reuse a level in its entirety with no explanation. Even though, like in Armored Core 1, you go through an underwater base blowing up crates. Armored Core 2, same underwater base, also blowing up crates. Now it's on Mars, no explanation.
There was a similar issue with Far Cry, wasn't there?
Never played Far Cry.
The most recent Far Cry game, Far Cry Colonial Racist, whatever the subtitle was. It was called Far Cry Primal, but the whole thing seems incredibly racist.
What? I played it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, well, it's about primitive people, and they speak but like...
It's not that racist.
It looks...
Did you play it?
No, I didn't play it, so to be fair, I did not play it, but...
I played it. I thought it was great. I had a great
made
time.
by a bunch of white dudes in Montreal, right? Like
I was riding a mammoth around. I was shooting fucking saber-toothed tigers with a bow and arrow. I was having a great time.
Well, but that's I apologize. That's besides the point anyway. The point was that apparently they reused the same map from like whatever the previous game was.
But the thing is,
did they? I don't know.
And they just
when I'm talking about
it.
Armored Core reusing stuff, I don't mean, oh, it's a shame they reused it. I mean, they just reuse it, no explanation.
Yeah.
Because it worked the first time. So it's like, hey, have it again. And
but if you change the mechanics enough, and if you...
Armored Core 1, Armored Core 2, and Armored Core 3 are, for all intents and purposes, minor improvements to exactly the same game, including, like, the same bosses, same levels. Like, they're distinct, but it's very, very similar.
So it's not like Yharnam versus the Storm King?
No, it's just, like, the same characters recur, even though it's, like, generations later and everyone's dead. It's like, oh, there's another sniper in a white robot called Valkyrie.
Yeah.
With no explanation.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they have released a thing, it's called Armored Core Evolution Revolution, which is literally just remakes of old levels.
Wow.
It's like called Evolution Revolution, it's two
Metal
discs,
Gear Solid
One's
Rising
Evolution,
Revengeance.
Yeah, it's like that.
The most
it's Evolution
original
Revolution.
Armored Core game is 4 Answer. That one is like completely...
Yeah, Armored Core 4... Armored Core 4 is where the series actually, like, it's like the change between Dark Souls and Bloodborne gets really, really fast, and, like, certain, like, the variety of builds takes a real nosedive because everything's about speed.
You know who came on for Armored Core 4?
Hidetaka Miyazaki.
Yeah.
Hidetaka Miyazaki.
Yeah, and, like, Yui Tanimura did Armored Core 2, I think.
Oh, really? Wow.
He's an old hand,
I don't remember.
So let's bring this back to Dark Souls 3, just because I'm running out of steam here. Well, so, like, what did you guys think of Storm Ruler and that whole thing?
I don't like the number of gimmick bosses in the game. I think there's way too many. By which I mean there's, like, 3.
I think that the Ancient Wyvern was pretty cool.
I think the Ancient Wyvern is cool the first time.
Yeah.
Then it just becomes, like...
thing.
Yeah.
And it's just a speedrun boss, basically.
In Demon Souls... Something people forget is that every single archdemon in Demon Souls, except for King Allant, is a gimmick boss.
Yeah, it's the Dragon God.
The Dragon God,
Storm
like,
King.
They're super, super gimmick bosses in Dark Souls 3, though.
But yet, well, what I'm saying is, those are gimmick bosses done incredibly. The difference between the Storm King and Yharnam is so... mind-blowingly vast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That I can't even begin to comprehend the fact that it's made by the same studio.
Or even to make it even worse, Yharnam the Tower Knight.
Yeah.
Yharnam the Tower Knight, they're both giants. You hit their feet, doesn't do any damage. The difference is, Demon Souls, like builds an arena around it. It adds all these mechanics where you can, like, knock it over. If you've got a ranged weapon, you can stand up high and shoot him. There's guys with crossbows that are shooting down at you, so you have to manage them. There's places where you can take cover. It's really well done. Yorm, you pick up Storm Ruler, charge it, hit him 3 times, he's dead.
Otherwise,
That's
it's the
the whole
most
boss.
tedious boss they've ever
It's so
ever
fucking
made.
boring.
Yeah.
And, like, Volnir. You hit Volnir,
I
and
kind of like
the
that
bangles,
boss. I
the
think that's
bangles
kind of a cool
disappear.
boss. No, you guys didn't like
no,
that?
but it's a cool set piece, but it's not
It's
interesting.
so cool,
Yeah.
and then it's over.
Yeah.
I love the way he kind of falls into the abyss at the end.
No, don't get me wrong. The boss, his design,
it's
looks
awesome.
awesome.
Yeah.
His arena is awesome. The way you get to him is awesome. The fight is not awesome. You just hit the bracelets 5 times each, and it's over.
Well,
It's really boring.
he's very attached to his jewelry.
He loves his bling. We know, but it's really boring.
What about
And-
the old Demon King? You guys like the old Demon King?
I forgot he
Fuck
existed
off.
until then.
I
He
liked the
doesn't
whole.
lead anywhere.
I liked the boss
The
room.
Demon Ruins is completely useless.
I thought it was pretty good. Like
Demon Ruins is useless, but there's at least, like, stuff there you can get.
and
So
environmental
why not
environmental
put
storytelling
the
in
Demon
spades
King,
too. No,
like, halfway into Demon Ruins. So there's at
I
least stuff
spent
behind
like
it.
3 hours going around in the Demon Ruins, positive that I must be missing a door somewhere and feeling like an idiot.
Yeah.
Until I finally just gave up and moved on.
did you guys know you can make Night Slayer Sorg fight himself?
How?
I know you can summon him and I know you can fight him and I wondered that.
You
but I
defeat
never
him.
tried it.
I have. I'm working on a video for that. You defeat him as an invader in the catacombs, and then
Yeah.
what I did. So I cheesed it because it took so freaking long. I cleared out all the enemies in between the summon sign that appears after you kill him as an invader and him under that bridge leading up to the ballista, and I basically led him. I tried to do it with the enemies in the way first, but he would never actually make it there.
Yeah, I
so
remember wondering if you could make him fight.
I
himself,
created
but
a save
never-
point. Yeah, I made him fight himself. I think I did it 8 times, and before I finally got tired and helped him kill himself because he just kept getting his ass kicked by himself over and over. And I was like, that is such nonsense that like I guess it makes sense for balance reasons, but it shows how overpowered he is just as an enemy. That's just time and time again. And you can also get him to fight the Black Knight on the bridge above him. But he usually obliterates the Black Knight in like 1 hit.
He's got that Fume Knight Ultra Greatsword, dude.
Which is interesting, but I don't know what to make of that yet. The ghosts in Irithyll,
Yep.
Those are cool.
those correspond seemingly. So how many ghosts there are the 2 ghosts together who seem to be
I think
Vort
that's Vort and the Dancer.
and the Dancer.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then are there 2 or 3 of the single ghosts?
There's 2. I want to say 2, but I could be wrong.
I thought there was 2 as well. I keep saying this, and I need to go check it out because there are 3 Outrider Knights that you find.
Yeah, there's 3.
They're all single spawn.
There's one in Lothric. There's one in.
There's one in the Grand Archives, one below the
one at
2
the
dragons
base-
of the bridge, and one
One
near
at
Road
the
of
beginning of the
Sacrifice.
Road of Sacrifices.
Oh,
Yeah,
I forgot about the other one in the Grand Archives. Yeah.
yeah, and so I thought that was a really cool touch because if you notice, it's the exact same look as when you're seeing a player.
Yeah.
You're seeing a player ghost, and
I think they're a different color. I think they have like a purplish tint.
no, it's pretty much exactly the same.
Is it the same?
It's exactly the same. Because the thing that's amazing about that I just found really interesting is that, and I've just been dying to talk about this. I talked about this last live stream, but I want to talk about it again. Is that when say you're waiting for a friend to summon and the summon sign isn't working. I don't know if you guys have ever had this happen where you see your friend's ghost. You say, "Oh, I see you're standing at the bonfire," and they say, "No, I'm standing way the heck over there." So what you see,
because it's not at the.
it's not concurrent.
occurring-
It's not concurrent.
Right.
You're seeing a replay of something
Yeah.
that happened, an indeterminate amount of time ago. Like
Usually like 5 to 10.
5 to
minutes
10
ago.
minutes, something like that. But in this case, it's brilliant. Absolutely
you're
brilliant.
seeing a replay
You're
of-
seeing a
of
replay
them
of them
leaving
leaving
Irithyll.
Irithyll. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, it's
Yeah,
so
it's really
brilliant. Other things I like.
Irithyl's great. I love Irithyll. Irithyl's awesome. The Undead Settlement is not great.
Yeah, well, It's
Farron Keep is
bland.
not great.
It's
the
not-
undead
I
settlement
wouldn't say
feels
it's
very,
bad,
very
but it's just kind of.
repressive or oppressive. I don't even know what words
Really?
I'm using.
I just found it like you just run through it, and it's
Yeah.
huge, but there's nothing there.
Yeah, and I don't know, part of it for me is that I'm used to having good routes through areas, and I still have no, like, I'm still warping back and forth whenever I need to finish doing things in that place.
Speaking of warping back and forth, I was so disappointed by the incredible number of bonfires in Dark Souls 3 and how you stumble
was
upon
too.
one every 5 feet. I was very disappointed.
Do we want
have
to talk
a-
about that? Like because people might not know that originally the idea was you would make your own bonfires out of defeated
Yes, that
enemies,
got
and
cut.
that seems to have been cut pretty late on. So it looks like they just went, oh dear, bonfire. Okay, done.
It's also, I think, an example of where melding all of the previous Souls games in Dark Souls 3 did not work well. Because, and it has nothing to do with Dark Souls 2, it has to do with the fact that you get bonfires after defeating bosses, which is Demon Souls and Bloodborne.
Yes.
So they mix this. So if you take out, and also the bonfires at the start of areas seems to also come from Bloodborne. Chalice
there's
dungeons.
also there's a bonfire at the start of every single area,
Yes.
even if the start of the area is like 5 feet away from
So
the last
Undead
bonfire.
Settlement
Like, oh
is
my god, like
yeah.
Vort. You beat Vort, there's a bonfire. You go to Undead Settlement, there's a bonfire. You go through a gate, and there is immediately... That's 3 bonfires in a row. It's, like, ridiculous.
So that's it, though. It's that they added not only the Demon Souls Bloodborne defeat a boss, get a lamp system, but also the what do they call the first room in the Chalice dungeons? Chamber of the Seal. They also added Chamber of the Seal bonfires.
It's like I was really looking forward to Bloodborne-style shortcut level design in Dark Souls 3.
It was still there, though.
It was there
It's
in a few
there in
places. It was
Lothric.
there in Cathedral of the Deep. It was there in Lothric.
Cathedral of the
It
Deep is
there-
amazing.
Cathedral of the Deep is great. It was there in Lothric. It's really done well. It's there in Irithyll. It's really done well. But then you have places like the Road of Sacrifices, which is just a straight line with 3 or 4 bonfires.
Farron Keep as well. I fucking
Keep.
hate Farron Keep.
Yeah, it's just a
swamp.
big area with 3 or 4 bonfires sort of littered around.
As I understand it, you can use the dagger to quick step through, but
it's just like
why is there no fucking rusted iron ring? I'm still upset about that.
It's so weird that there are areas of Dark Souls 3 that just have really solid level design or have really solid boss design. I think the Twin Princes is an incredible boss fight.
Yeah,
I
it
think
really
that
is.
The Soul of Cinder is I think the Twin Princes, I think, is the first time that a double boss has worked since Ornstein and Smaug. Like, the Twin Princes is great. I think that the Soul of Cinder is great. I think the Nameless King is great.
Soul of Cinder, the fact that the Soul of Cinder really only uses moves that players can use in that first phase, I think is the coolest fucking thing.
Only from Dark Souls 1, too.
Doesn't it use Soulstream?
Yes, you're right. He does use Soulstream.
My first thought when I saw that was, oh my gosh, Goku linked the fire.
Yeah.
Kamehameha!
Or a Shinku Hadoken from Ryu.
But yeah, so it's definitely...
Like, you look at those bosses, and then you compare them to, like, Yharnam. And it's just like, was this really made by the same company?
But the thing is,
it's
it's
like,
got
you look at-
3 directors, so it probably wasn't made by the same.
And that's what I'm saying, is like,
so
it
that's
shows.
probably the impact of the base. Like, even though it was made over the course of 3 years, the fact that they've been releasing a Souls game every year for 3 years in a row, after Demon Souls was 2009, Dark Souls 1 was 2011, Dark Souls 2 was 2014, Bloodborne 2015, and
this 2016.
Dark Souls 3 2016.
Well, Dark Souls 2 and Bloodborne were designed at, like, the same time.
Yeah, that's why Miyazaki's co-director, because he was doing Bloodborne and then he like switched over when Bloodborne was done.
Yeah, see, that's
Dark
what I
Souls
mean.
2 and Bloodborne were being designed at the same time, and then as soon as Dark Souls 2 was finished, Bloodborne was like 75% done, so they started Dark Souls 3, and then after Bloodborne was done, everyone else went back to Dark Souls 3.
So I think we really just got to kind of take the good with the bad. Because like part of it is that a lot of these problems I think arise from the fact that split dev teams and quick development cycles. But on the other hand, we'd still be, or at least I would still be frustrated about the PvP or lack thereof in Bloodborne.
Yeah.
Were it not for this, right?
Yeah, the online stuff in Bloodborne is bad, and Bloodborne has I have defended Bloodborne from a lot of criticisms.
But you can't defend the PvP in Bloodborne.
I can't defend the PvP, but even worse than the PvP
lack of builds
is the lack of builds.
Lack of variety.
The lack of variability in builds is its biggest flaw, and that is the one thing I will never defend it against.
And the non-viability of like arcane builds and stuff like that. Because
arcane builds got a lot better.
They got a lot better with the old
DLC,
hunters.
But you still needed to go through huge parts of the game at super low level.
The biggest problem. And JSF and I, we were just chatting about it, and it was like, what if once you beat the Orphan of Kos, you unlocked a new origin, like Priest of Kos, where you started off with the Milkweed, the Kos Parasite, and the Accursed Brew. And like, what if once you beat Logarius and talked to Annalise, you unlocked like 2 new origins where you could start with the Logarius Wheel and the Kirkhammer.
Or what if they allowed you to
origins
respec?
are classes, but everyone starts with the foreign garb and one of 3 trick weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it's like...
What if you could respec as well, is another thing that would...
I don't think you need respec.
You don't need respec because the builds themselves are so like...
Well, you don't need respecing in Bloodborne because the builds are so low level.
You're going to be a glass cannon that parries regardless of what you do.
Like you needed respecing in Dark Souls 2 because like by the time you finished your first new game, you were like level 180, 190 or something.
Yeah.
So like if you wanted to try something else, like you needed to. But in Bloodborne, the average player finishes anywhere between 70 to 90, and then there are big outliers. If you're very cautious and you take your time a lot, you'll end up with a higher level. Mm-hmm. And if you're really carefree, you just sort of YOLO everything, you'll end up with a lower level.
Yeah. Well, that's... do you guys have anything else you want to talk about? Because I'm pretty pooped.
I guess, like, people were complaining that there's too many night bosses in Dark Souls 3, and I'm just thinking, like, those were the good ones.
People were complaining about that in Dark Souls 2 as well.
Yeah.
But in Dark Souls 2, it was a valid
point. It was a problem there. And they were very, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The problem with Dark Souls 2... Dark Souls 2's boss design is that there were a couple of really cool boss fights against, like, one-on-one night human-sized enemies, but there were so many of them that it kind of got muddled. Like, I love the Fume Knight.
I was just about to say, but Dark Souls 2 also had the Fume Knight, which is one of my favorite bosses.
And Dark Souls 2 also has the Old Chaos, which is one of the greatest,
the most cinematic
set pieces and boss fights
and
in
like
the series.
Tellingly, this is from the DLC, which was done after all the development hell was over.
And the DLC is a thousand times better than the main game. The DLC
level
design too is phenomenal.
Broom Tower and
Broom Tower is great. Everything is great. I hate the Sunken King, but that's only because I hate poison.
Yeah.
So that's just my personal problems with it. But aside from that, it's great.
Yep.
There were a lot of like multiple enemy bosses in Dark Souls 3, but they worked a lot better than in 2, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
Like Deacons of the Deep.
Deacons of the Deep. Was that the only one in Dark Souls 3?
I remember there being someone saying they were more.
Like, I can't think of any other mob
Abyss Watchers. That's not really
Abyss Watchers,
but
also Crystal Sages as well.
Oh yeah, Crystal Sage, yeah.
No, because Crystal Sage is just Fool's Idol again.
But there's still can do some serious damage.
Yeah, I guess, sure.
If you compare that to
is there like a Royal Rat Authority, which is like the worst example?
Yeah, but exactly. They're in there, but there's nothing like the Royal Rat Authority, where it's just like, fuck you, here's a bunch of rats. It's like...
Yeah.
Yeah, but then there's fucking Irithyll Dungeon. Oh my god. The Wretch guys, I don't know what they're called, but they scare me. The guy hanging from the wall, like... like it took me like 10 minutes to get through that room because like the literally the hair on my arm stood up.
The fact that you can't target that first guy is you should be able to target him.
And the way that he looks at you is like, oh my god.
You should be able to target him.
Those enemies though, the jailers.
Yeah.
Are they not like the most like I don't know if I've ever been more aggravated by.
Yeah,
Look, I mean it's funny, like, all of a sudden Dark Souls 3 turns into a survival horror game where, like, you're hiding behind corners and shit because you don't want to get your health drained.
But people complained about like the Cyan Knight Gauntlet in vanilla Dark Souls 2 in front of what's his face, Vendrick and Velstock.
Velstock.
But I fucking loved running, and maybe just because I loved parrying those guys.
I think it was better in Scholars with the Dragon Rider.
Oh, I hated that.
Cooler.
Well, because he got like 10,000 HP. Like,
but
ridiculous.
I thought it was a better indication of last line of defense.
Yeah.
Here's a boss that's just a regular enemy.
Yeah.
Like you are like breaking through like the final line of like all the Cyan Knights and then a Dragon Rider and then Velstadt and then you get to Vendrick.
Yeah, it's like this is the final line of defense. And
then I discovered that
because the game keeps going. But yeah,
I could parry Velstock,
Right.
and it was like, oh my god, because he ruined 2 no death, no bonfire runs for me, I think.
Oh.
Nice.
And then in the one successful one that I did on live stream, I parried the crap out of him, and I think he hit me once. So that was pretty satisfying. But
I didn't even know Velstock could be parried.
yeah, yep, you parry. Yeah, speaking of which, parrying Dark Souls 3 is a freaking nightmare. It's so
tried it.
I never
inconsistent.
bothered.
Just because I two-hand greatswords, that's how I play Dark Souls.
Yeah.
And so I never tried parrying.
I just
I've always
shield
been
all the
obsessed
way
with
through.
parrying, but and I think part of it is that I insist on using the parrying dagger because that's what I loved using in Dark Souls 2.
I think that's probably why people have so much trouble with the Pontiff, because I didn't have any trouble with the Pontiff at all.
Yeah, I didn't
and,
either.
Like, people are like, oh, but he's so hard to parry. And I was like, I didn't even know you could parry him. I just hit him with my stick until he dies.
Yeah, that boss I felt invoked what's it called a lot from Dark Souls 2.
Dark Lurker?
Yeah, Dark Lurker, very cool.
Yeah.
Very, I really
Pontiff
like
was
that
a cool
boss. So I guess
really
that's
like-
technically another multiple enemy boss in a way.
It's
Yeah, he's
not,
cleansed
though,
himself.
and I'll tell you why. It's because it fixes the problem of the multiple enemy boss in that his illusion thing
Yeah,
keeps
same moves.
teleporting back to him.
That
So that
that
the camera
and
doesn't get fucked over, because the main enemy when you're dealing with 2 bosses is always the camera.
yeah.
Right? It's never the actual bosses.
And also, yeah, it was really elegant the way that the shadow actually acts as a shadow. Like, it does the
cool.
same moves as the boss. I thought that was a really
It's
cool
really
touch.
cool. It's like a doppelganger.
And the whole Anor Londo
game
thing,
changer.
I felt, was handled incredibly well, too.
Yeah, really well.
Really,
with the
really well.
one exception that it can be spoiled in-game by Yuria if you talk to her at a certain time.
Oh, well, see, but
she says your spouse
go to
always in
Anor
Orlando."
Londo before you've been to Anor Londo.
but that's also a quest line that is very hard to do.
It's a
If
quest
you're
line that
100%
most
blind.
people will not get, but it is possible.
It's possible.
It is possible
Yeah.
for Yuria to say, go to the Darkmoon Tomb in Anor Londo before you've even been
Yeah,
to Anor Londo.
yeah.
And that's a problem.
But I think that their thought process was probably that, because how likely is it that someone's gonna die all of these times, always return to Yol and be like, hey, free levels. you know?
It's still something.
Yeah.
When this is your big reveal, because that is your big reveal of Dark Souls 3.
But it's also
is the slow creeping realization that you're in Anor Londo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like that's the money shot, right?
the moment
Which
the
you can
moment it
see
hit
live
me
if
wasn't
you watch my
wasn't
stream.
even it wasn't even seeing the Darkmoon Tomb, because I figured, okay, they could just put that anywhere else.
Right. Well, you're
it was
in the
it was the
Darkmoon Tomb
elevator.
and you're like, oh my god, is this the? It could, and then you go down and you're in Gwyn's tomb and you're like, oh man, and then you see the elevator.
Yeah,
and
it
you're
was
like,
the elevator for me.
"Oh," And then you go up and you see the through the door and you're like, oh, and then you walk over and it says Anor Londo and like the thing, and you go, oh, it's the money shot, right?
And so, someone made a really good, I think JSF pointed it out to me, really good comparison video of Anor Londo and Dark Souls 1 versus Dark Souls 3, showing like how much the textures and the lighting have improved, especially those two things.
Oh, I'm sure. You know what's funny is you can actually, if you spend the time after you beat the Pontiff, you can go
just
in that
look up.
courtyard. If you look up,
Yeah, you can see
you
it.
actually see all of Anor Londo
Yep.
up there. You can just see it.
I didn't see
which
it.
is hilarious.
Yep.
Nobody did. Of course
Yeah.
you did.
Yeah.
Who does that on their first time through?
Oh god, and the what's his face? The two dogs in that pit.
The Watchdogs
yeah.
and the Cold Lords.
Watching the Cold Lords.
What's the guy's name?
McDonald.
Archdeacon McDonald.
McDonald, yeah, McDonald's. I think they're called McDonald's Watchdogs.
With
or
his-
So
something.
they're called
his berserk
Sullivan's
beasts.
Beasts, aren't they?
Like
called
the
berserk
enemy type in
beasts.
general, yeah. Well, I don't know. I was looking at Fex for Life though, and they've been
They're
known
the
to just
wolves
completely
from
make
Guts
things up.
Berserker's armor.
They are.
Oh,
Like-
those guys. But then I learned that they were weak to bleed, and they weren't so scary anymore. But still, like, that was a nightmare at first. Alright, well, my recording is at an hour and a half, and that's the second recording.
Yeah, mine too.
So, and I think the first one we were at like 2 hours and 50 minutes. So I think
Something
that's
like that.
probably a good place for us to call
Should
it.
we say goodbye?
I think we should say goodbye. So I hope that if in fact this ends up making it into the same video, because I'm thinking maybe if it's really long and I want to keep all this stuff in, I might just post a separate video, but we shall see. But either way, I hope that those of you watching have enjoyed us just rambling on and on with no rhyme or reason about Dark Souls 3, and also the Bloodborne rambling that preceded it.
And Armored Core.
And Armored Core and video game industry and all the other stuff. But so my thanks once again to JSF and Redgrave for joining me once again. It's been great having you guys on, not only for the finale.
It's been great being on.
Well, it's
Blast, man.
really, and if you look at the comments and the views of like the other episodes where either of you were on, people really seem to enjoy this. So hopefully we'll do more of this for Dark Souls 3 Let's Talk Lore, which once again will be unlikely that will start in earnest until late July, early August at the earliest. But yeah, stay tuned for that.
We can come back for the first episode and just criticize your character creation.
No, I'll do that. I'll do that off camera first, so that I won't show that to you guys, so that I can have that. But but yeah, thank you all very much for joining us, and we will see you in the next playthrough.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
I was waiting to see who would jump in for the bye-bye. I was thinking of like flipping a coin or something, but then I was like, no, I'll just throw it out there and see.
You should leave this end to the video. Just have it trail off with this.
Yeah, just more rambling. All right, I'm stopping my recording.